Rachel Stone stood alone in her corner office at midnight, staring at the glittering city below through floor-to-ceiling windows that cost more than most people's homes. At 42, she had everything, except someone to come home to. The CEO title that made boardrooms silent made her personal life emptier. Tonight, exhaustion cracked her armor. When Evan Brooks knocked softly on her open door, apologizing for working late, she made a choice that would unravel everything she'd carefully built to protect herself. "Can I tell you something I've never said out loud?" Her voice trembled. "No one has ever chosen me. Not once. Not ever." The confession hung between them like broken glass, sharp and honest and impossible to take back. Thank you for joining me in this story. I invite you to stay with me until the end. Let's see where Rachel and Evan's journey takes us. Please hit the like button and comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The executive floor of Stone and Associates had been empty for hours. Rachel stood motionless before the windows of her corner office, her reflection ghostly against the backdrop of downtown lights. Friday night, nearly midnight, and she was exactly where she spent most Friday nights, alone in a building designed to intimidate, surrounded by the trappings of success that felt increasingly hollow. She'd removed her heels hours ago. Her feet ached against the cold marble floor, but she didn't move to the comfort of her leather chair. There was something fitting about the discomfort, something honest about standing here in stockinged feet, stripped of the armor her Louboutins provided. The city below pulsed with life. People heading to late dinners, bars, homes where someone waited. Rachel pressed her palm against the glass, feeling its coolness seep into her skin. "Miss Stone?" She turned sharply, her professional mask snapping into place even as her heart hammered. Evan Brooks stood in her doorway, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, looking as startled to find her there as she was to be caught in such an unguarded moment. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was finishing the Morrison presentation and saw your light still on. I wanted to make sure everything was okay before I left." Rachel studied him for a moment. Evan Brooks, senior project manager, recently transferred from their Boston office. 38, widower, single father to a 7-year-old daughter. She knew these facts from his personnel file, but standing here in the quiet vulnerability of midnight, she saw something else. The exhaustion in his eyes that mirrored her own. The loosened tie that suggested he'd been here almost as long as she had. "Everything's fine," she said automatically. Then, surprising herself, she added, "Just thinking." Evan shifted his weight, clearly debating whether to leave. Professional protocol dictated he should excuse himself immediately. But something in the moment, the late hour, the empty building, the shared weariness, made him stay. "The Morrison presentation is exceptional work," Rachel said, gesturing vaguely toward his laptop bag. "Your team has exceeded every expectation since you came on board. The board specifically mentioned your division's performance in last week's meeting." "Thank you." Evan's surprise was genuine. "That means a lot. This opportunity, this position, it's been important for me and my daughter. Stability after—" He trailed off, then seemed to catch himself. "I'm sorry. That's probably more personal than you need to hear at midnight on a Friday." "Is it?" Rachel heard herself ask. She moved away from the window, closer to where he stood, not close enough to violate professional space, but close enough to really see him. "When was the last time someone asked you how you're actually doing, Evan? Not the professional summary version. The real answer." The question clearly caught him off guard. He studied her face, perhaps trying to determine if this was some kind of test. When he spoke, his voice was careful but honest. "Tired," he admitted. "Sophie, my daughter. She's been having nightmares again. About her mom. The grief counselor says it's normal, especially with the anniversary coming up, but watching her wake up crying, trying to explain why her mother isn't coming back..." He stopped, shaking his head. "I'm sorry. You asked a simple question, and I'm unloading years of complicated." "Don't apologize." Rachel's voice came out softer than she intended. "Complicated is honest. I appreciate honest." Something shifted in the air between them. Evan set his laptop bag down, a gesture that felt significant. A decision to stay rather than flee to the safety of professional boundaries. Can I ask you the same question? He said quietly. How are you really doing, Ms. Stone? No one asked her that, ever. Employees wanted her approval, board members wanted her strategy, investors wanted her projections. But no one wanted to know if Rachel Stone, the woman beneath the title, was okay. Lonely, she said, and the word landed between them with startling weight. I'm very, very lonely. The admission cost her something. She could see Evan processing it, weighing how to respond to such raw honesty from someone who signed his paychecks. But when he spoke, there was no pity in his voice, only recognition. I understand that, he said. Different circumstances, maybe, but I understand it. Rachel moved to her desk, not to put distance between them, but to steady herself against something solid. Do you know what the strangest part of success is? She didn't wait for him to answer. Everyone assumes you have everything. The corner office, the salary, the respect. They see all of that and think you must be content. Happy, even. But no one sees that you go home to an empty apartment every night, that you eat dinner alone, that you can't remember the last time someone touched you with affection rather than a professional handshake. Ms. Stone, Rachel, she interrupted, right now, at midnight, in an empty building where neither of us has anywhere better to be. You can call me Rachel. Rachel. Evan tested her name carefully, like something fragile. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired of pretending. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I've spent 20 years building this company. I've made myself invaluable, irreplaceable, respected. And somewhere along the way, I made myself untouchable. People admire me, some fear me. But no one... She stopped, fighting against the tightness in her throat. No one ever just wants me. Evan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his words were measured but genuine. That's not entirely true. Rachel looked up sharply. What? I said that's not entirely true. Evan met her gaze directly. Since I started here 3 months ago, I've noticed things about you that have nothing to do with quarterly reports or board meetings. The way you remember every employee's name, even the night cleaning crew. How you stay late on Fridays because you know the work can wait until Monday, but you don't want to go home yet. The fact that you take your coffee black because you don't want to bother anyone with complicated orders, even though I've seen you look longingly at the vanilla lattes other people drink. Rachel felt something crack open inside her chest. You noticed all that? I notice you, Evan said simply. And I don't think you're untouchable at all. I think you're exhausted from touching everyone else's lives while keeping your own carefully locked away. The accuracy of his observation left her breathless. She gripped the edge of her desk, suddenly unsteady. Why? She asked. Why would you pay attention to any of that? I'm your boss. I'm a decade older than you. I'm human, Evan finished. You're human. And maybe I recognize loneliness when I see it because I'm drowning in my own version. He took a step closer, still maintaining respectful distance but closing the gap between formal and personal. I lost my wife 3 years ago. Cancer. Aggressive, fast, brutal. One day we were planning Sophie's 5th birthday party. 6 months later, I was a single father trying to explain death to a child who still believed her mother would wake up. I'm so sorry, Rachel whispered. Everyone's sorry. Evan's voice roughened. They're sorry. They bring casseroles. They offer to babysit. But then they move on with their lives, with their intact families, and you're left standing in the wreckage trying to figure out how to be both parents, how to be enough when you're barely surviving yourself. Rachel understood that particular mathematics of inadequacy. And here? Moving here? Taking this position? Fresh start, Evan said. But that's what I told myself. New city, new job, new school for Sophie. Leave behind the memories and the pity and the well-meaning neighbors who still see me as that poor widower. He ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it further. But loneliness travels with you. It doesn't care about geography. No, Rachel agreed quietly. It doesn't. They stood in shared understanding, two people who'd become experts at functioning while fundamentally alone. The city lights continued their indifferent sparkle beyond the windows. Somewhere in the building, the HVAC system hummed. Time felt suspended, malleable. Can I tell you something I've never said out loud? Rachel's voice came out smaller than she intended. Evan simply nodded, giving her space to continue. No one has ever chosen me. The words tumbled out, years of accumulated hurt condensing into a single confession. Not once, not ever. I've had relationships. I'm not completely isolated, but every single one ended the same way. They chose something else, someone else, an easier option, a more convenient fit. I was always the temporary stop, never the destination. Rachel. In college, he chose his childhood sweetheart who came back into his life. In my 20s, he chose his career opportunity across the country over building something with me. In my 30s, he chose not to deal with my health crisis because it was too much. She laughed bitterly. That one particularly stung. Turns out surviving cancer isn't attractive. It's complicated, messy, requires actual commitment. Evan's expression shifted to something fierce and protective. He left you during cancer treatment? Not during. After. Rachel's fingers traced absent patterns on her desk surface. After the surgeries, after the treatments. When I was in remission but permanently changed, he said he couldn't handle what it meant for our future. The scars, the infertility, the constant medical monitoring. She finally looked up at Evan. He needed someone whole, and I wasn't anymore. The silence that followed felt heavy with unexpressed emotion. Evan's hands had curled into fists at his sides, his jaw tight. I'm going to say something that might be inappropriate given our professional relationship, he said finally, but that man was a coward and a fool, and you are whole. Surviving doesn't make you broken. It makes you a warrior. Rachel felt tears sting her eyes, rare, dangerous tears she never allowed in public. But this didn't feel entirely public anymore. This felt like something else entirely. I don't feel like a warrior, she admitted. I feel like damaged goods that no one wants to deal with. Then you're feeling the wrong thing. Evan moved closer, finally crossing into personal space. He didn't touch her, but his proximity radiated warmth and certainty. You want to know what I see when I look at you? Someone who built an empire from nothing. Someone who survived something that destroys people. Someone strong enough to stand alone but brave enough to admit she doesn't want to anymore. Evan. His name came out as half warning, half plea. I know, he said quietly. I know all the reasons this is complicated. The position difference, the professional ethics, the fact that I'm a widower with a young daughter and you're a CEO with a company to run. I know all of it. He paused, his dark eyes searching her face. But standing here right now, none of that feels like it matters as much as one simple truth. What truth? That I would choose you. The words landed with quiet devastation. If given the chance, Rachel, I would absolutely choose you. The declaration hung between them, impossible and electric. Rachel couldn't breathe, couldn't process the enormity of what he had just offered. Part of her wanted to retreat into professional safety, to laugh off this midnight confession as exhaustion and poor judgment. But a larger part, the part that had been starving for years, wanted to step forward into the terrifying possibility he represented. You don't know me, she whispered. Not really. You know the professional version, the competent executive. But there are things about me, Evan, complicated, difficult things that changed me in fundamental ways. Like surviving cancer? He said it gently, without judgment. Rachel, I buried my wife after watching her waste away for months. I understand complicated medical realities. I understand scars, both visible and invisible. And I'm still standing here telling you that none of that changes what I see when I look at you. The infertility. I have Sophie. Evan's voice was firm. I'm not looking to build a family from scratch. I already have a daughter who needs stability and love. If anything, that makes things less complicated, not more. Rachel shook her head, tears finally spilling over. You say that now, but you don't understand what it means. The surgeries left scars, physical reminders of everything I lost. Every time you'd see them, you'd remember that you're what? Evan interrupted. Alive? That you fought and won. Rachel, scars aren't marks of inadequacy. They're proof of survival. They're ugly. The admission came out raw and honest. I'm not who I was before. My body is marked and changed and human. Evan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face with devastating gentleness. His thumb brushed away her tears. Your body is human. It's been through trauma and treatment and recovery. And I promise you, that doesn't make it any less worthy of being touched with care. The tenderness in his touch and his words threatened to undo her completely. Rachel had spent years building walls against exactly this kind of vulnerability. But exhaustion and loneliness and the raw honesty of midnight had stripped her defenses away. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? That you'll change your mind. That once you really understand what being with me means, you'll realize it's too much, too complicated, that there's someone easier out there. Rachel. Evan's other hand came up to frame her face completely, his gaze intense and unwavering. I spent 3 years watching my wife die. I held her hand through treatments that ravaged her body. I loved her through every difficult, heartbreaking moment until her last breath. And I would do it all again because that's what love is. It's choosing someone anyway, choosing them especially, choosing them through the complicated parts. We barely know each other. Then let's change that. His thumbs continued their gentle motion across her cheekbones. No more midnight confessions and then retreating to professional distance on Monday morning. Let's actually try, really try, see where this goes. The ethics, we'll navigate them. Evan's conviction was absolute. We'll be transparent with HR. We'll make sure there's no conflict of interest in our reporting structure. We'll do this right, Rachel, but we'll do it. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly her chest ached with the force of it, but years of disappointment had taught her to protect herself. What if it doesn't work, she asked. What if we try and it falls apart, and then we've ruined a good working relationship, and what if it does work? Evan countered. What if we're both standing here, terrified and lonely, turning away from something real because we're too afraid to reach for it? How do we live with that regret? Rachel closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hands against her face, breathing in his scent, soap and coffee, and something essentially him. This was insane, reckless, completely inappropriate given their professional relationship, and yet standing here, feeling chosen for the first time in her life, she couldn't bring herself to step away. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Neither do I. Evan's breath ghosted across her face. I haven't dated since my wife died. I have no idea how to introduce someone to my daughter or balance a relationship with single parenthood or any of it. But I know I don't want to keep standing alone when standing together might be possible. Rachel opened her eyes, meeting his gaze directly. This is crazy. Probably. A small smile tugged at his mouth. But maybe the good kind of crazy, the brave kind. She should pull away, should reinstate professional boundaries and pretend this midnight confession never happened. Should protect herself from the inevitable disappointment when he realized she was too much trouble. Instead, she leaned into his touch. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we'll try. The smile that broke across Evan's face was like sunrise, warm and hopeful and devastating in its sincerity. Yeah? Yeah? Rachel managed a shaky laugh. But slowly, carefully, I need whatever you need, Evan promised. We'll take this at whatever pace feels right for you. No pressure, no expectations, just honest effort from both of us. The relief that flooded through her was physical, weakening her knees. Evan must have sensed it because his hand shifted to her shoulders, steadying her. When was the last time you ate? He asked, concern coloring his voice. Rachel had to think about it. Breakfast? Maybe? Rachel. The gentle reprimand in his tone made her feel cared for in a way she'd almost forgotten. That's nearly 16 hours ago. Come on. Come on where? There's a diner 2 blocks from here that's open 24 hours. Terrible coffee, but excellent pie. Evan's hand slid down her arms to catch her hands, lacing their fingers together. The gesture felt monumental. Let me buy you dinner at 1 in the morning. Let's start this properly. Looking down at their joined hands, Rachel felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been clenched tight for years. What about Sophie? Don't you need to get home? She's at a sleepover with her best friend until tomorrow afternoon, first one since we moved here. Evan squeezed her fingers gently. For once, I actually have time, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather spend it with. The simple honesty of the statement made Rachel's throat tight again. How long had it been since someone wanted her company? Not her business acumen or her strategic mind or her professional network. Just her? Terrible coffee, an excellent pie, she repeated, managing a genuine smile. That sounds perfect. They gathered their things in comfortable silence. Rachel slipped her heels back on, armor reasserting itself automatically. But when Evan offered his hand again as they walked toward the elevator, she took it. The building was still empty, their footsteps echoing through deserted hallways. In the elevator, their reflections stared back from polished steel, two people who looked professional and put together on the surface, hiding depths of loneliness beneath. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said as they descended. "Anything. Why me? Really? There must be dozens of women at this company, in this city, who would be less complicated, who don't come with professional ethics concerns and medical histories and—" "Rachel." Evan turned to face her fully. "I've spent 3 years focused entirely on survival, getting Sophie through her grief, managing my own, building some kind of life from the wreckage. I haven't looked at anyone, haven't wanted to look at anyone, because nothing felt worth the risk of opening up again." He paused, his expression intense. "And then I walked past your office 3 months ago and heard you on the phone with one of our junior analysts who'd made a major mistake. You could have torn into them. Instead, you walked them through the solution and ended by saying everyone deserves grace when they're learning, and I thought, that's someone worth knowing. That made you notice me? A phone call? That started it. Then I noticed how you are in meetings, fierce and brilliant, but you listen to everyone, even the newest hires. I noticed you staying late on Fridays, not because work demanded it, but because empty apartments are lonelier than empty offices. I noticed you watching parents pick up their kids during that company picnic last month with something wistful in your expression." Evan's voice softened. "I noticed all the small ways you're achingly human beneath that executive armor, and I started wanting to know the woman behind the title." The elevator doors opened to the empty lobby. Their footsteps echoed across marble floors as they walked toward the exit. Outside, the city night enveloped them, cooler than the air-conditioned building, alive with distant traffic and muffled music from nearby bars. "This way." Evan gestured toward a side street, still holding her hand. They walked in comfortable silence for a block before Rachel spoke again. "I should tell you something before we go any further with this." "Okay." "The cancer, ovarian cancer specifically, the treatment was aggressive. Hysterectomy, chemotherapy, radiation. I was 36. I'd always thought I'd have children someday, when the timing was right, when I'd built the business enough to step back." She forced herself to continue. "That choice was taken from me. And it changed me in ways that go beyond physical scars. There's grief in it, anger, a sense of fundamental loss that I'm still processing." Evan squeezed her hand. "Thank you for telling me. That's a huge thing to carry." "It's baggage," Rachel said bluntly. "The kind of baggage most people don't want to deal with." "It's your story." Evan stopped walking, turning to face her under a streetlight. "It's part of what shaped you into who you are. And who you are is someone I want to know better. All of you, Rachel. Not just the easy parts." The sincerity in his face, the complete absence of judgment, made something fundamental shift inside her. This man, this widower with his own grief and complications, was offering her something she'd stopped believing existed. Acceptance without conditions. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." The diner was exactly as Evan described. Worn vinyl booths, fluorescent lighting, and a laminated menu featuring breakfast available all day. A tired-looking waitress with kind eyes seated them in a corner booth, poured water, and promised to return for their order. "The pie," Evan said seriously, "is legitimately the best in the city. Sophie and I discovered this place our second week here. She insisted on trying every variety. We're currently on round 2. "What's her favorite?" "Lemon meringue. Though she's a purist about it, the meringue has to be torched properly or she'll give it a very serious rating of just okay." The warmth in his voice when discussing his daughter was palpable. "She's opinionated about desserts, among other things." Rachel found herself smiling. "Tell me about her. Really." Evan's entire demeanor softened. "She's remarkable. Funny and bright and completely herself. Looks exactly like her mother. Dark curly hair, big brown eyes, this smile that lights up rooms. He pulled out his phone, navigating to photos. This was last week at the Science Museum. The image showed a small girl with wild curls barely contained by a headband, grinning at the camera while holding up a fossil. Her joy was uncomplicated and radiant. "She's beautiful," Rachel said honestly. "She's everything." Evan studied the photo fondly before putting his phone away. "Being her father is the only thing that got me through losing her mother. Having to show up every day, even when I wanted to disappear into grief. Having to answer impossible questions about death and heaven and why bad things happen. Having to be enough parent for two people." He met Rachel's eyes. "It's terrifying and exhausting and the most important thing I'll ever do." That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. It's reality. When you're the only parent left, you don't get the luxury of falling apart. Or if you do, it has to be in stolen moments when she's asleep. You hold yourself together during the day and quietly break at night. His expression turned rueful. "Not that different from running a company alone, I'd imagine." Rachel nodded slowly. "The loneliness of being the final decision maker. The weight of everyone depending on you. The impossibility of showing weakness." "Exactly." The waitress returned for their order. Evan requested coffee and apple pie. Rachel, feeling reckless in this strange, suspended night, ordered the same. "Living dangerously," Evan teased gently. "I warned you about the coffee." "Maybe I'm ready to live a little dangerously." The words came out more meaningful than she'd intended. Evan's expression turned serious. "Are you? Really? Because I meant what I said earlier, Rachel. I would choose you. I am choosing you. But I need to know you're choosing this too. That this isn't just a midnight moment that disappears in daylight." But Rachel considered the question. Really considered it. Everything logical screamed that this was a terrible idea. The professional complications alone were enormous. The personal risks even greater. She'd survived cancer and heartbreak by building walls and focusing on work and keeping everyone at arm's length. Opening herself up again meant making herself vulnerable to all the ways people could leave. But sitting across from Evan in a worn diner booth at 1 a.m, seeing the hope and fear and absolute sincerity in his expression, she realized something. The walls that protected her also imprisoned her. Safety had become synonymous with isolation, and she was so tired of being safe and alone. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "of getting hurt again, of not being enough, of all the ways this could go wrong." "Me too," Evan said quietly, "but I'm choosing it anyway." Rachel reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "I'm choosing you, whatever this becomes. I'm choosing to try." The smile that broke across Evan's face was worth every risk. His hand turned over beneath hers, lacing their fingers together across the scarred Formica table. "Then we'll figure it out together," he said. "The professional ethics, the personal complications, all of it, together." The coffee, when it arrived, was indeed terrible. The pie was transcendent. They talked for 2 hours, conversation flowing easily from childhood stories to favorite books to the strange parallels in their separate loneliness. Evan told her about Sophie's elaborate bedtime negotiations and her current obsession with butterflies. Rachel found herself confessing her secret addiction to terrible reality television and her dream of learning to sail someday. "Someday soon?" Evan asked. "Or theoretical someday?" "I don't know." Rachel stabbed at the last of her pie. "I'm good at building businesses, less good at building life outside of work." "Then maybe that's something we work on." Evan's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Together. Life outside of work. Actual hobbies and experiences and time that isn't about productivity." The concept felt foreign and appealing in equal measure. "You'd really want that? To spend time together that isn't this?" She gestured vaguely at the space between them, meaning the intensity, the deep conversation, the emotional excavation. "Rachel, I'd be happy spending time with you doing absolutely nothing, watching terrible TV, attempting to sail, teaching you Sophie's elaborate rating system for baked goods." He grinned. "Though fair warning, she takes dessert very seriously. There are criteria." The image of it, casual time together, integrated into each other's lives, felt both terrifying and wonderful. Rachel was so accustomed to keeping her personal life separate, contained, that the idea of blending it with someone else's seemed impossibly complex. "What about Sophie?" she asked carefully. "How would this work? When would you even tell her?" Evan sobered slightly. Slowly, carefully. "She's been through so much loss already. I won't introduce someone into her life unless I'm certain about them. About us." He met Rachel's eyes. "Which means we need time first. Just us, figuring out if this is real and sustainable. Building something solid before we expand it to include her." The thoughtfulness of his approach, the clear prioritization of his daughter's well-being, made Rachel respect him even more. "That makes sense. We need to know what this is before we involve anyone else." "Exactly." Evan glanced at his phone, grimacing at the time. "It's almost 4 in the morning." "Is it really?" Rachel hadn't noticed the hours passing. Time had felt elastic, inconsequential. "We should probably get some sleep, both of us." Evan signaled for the check. "Though, I'll be honest, I'm not sure I can sleep after tonight. My brain is too full of possibilities." "Mine too," Rachel admitted. Outside the diner, the city was caught in that strange pre-dawn quiet. Too late for night people. Too early for morning. They walked slowly back toward the office parking garage where both their cars waited. "So," Evan said as they reached Rachel's Mercedes, "what happens Monday?" "Monday we're professional," Rachel said firmly. "We schedule a meeting with HR to disclose the relationship and discuss appropriate boundaries. We make sure there's no conflict in our reporting structure. We do this right." "And outside of work?" Rachel allowed herself a small smile. "Outside of work, maybe you could text me? If you wanted. We could figure out when we might both have free time. Take this slow and see where it goes." "I'd like that." Evan reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. "I'd like that a lot." They stood in the dim parking garage, the moment stretching between them. Rachel wanted to kiss him, wanted it with an intensity that surprised her. But something held her back, maybe caution, maybe fear, maybe just the knowledge that they had time now. They'd chosen each other. They didn't have to rush. "Good night, Evan," she said softly. "Good night, Rachel." He stepped back reluctantly. "I'll text you tomorrow. Or later today, I guess." She watched him walk to his own car, a practical SUV with a booster seat visible in the back. Watched him drive away with a wave. Then she sat in her own car for a long moment, processing everything that had shifted in the span of a few hours. Someone had chosen her, not despite her complications, but including them. Not as a temporary stop, but as a destination worth reaching for. The magnitude of it felt overwhelming and exhilarating in equal measure. Rachel drove home as dawn began painting the sky pink and gold, feeling more awake and alive than she had in years. Her apartment, usually oppressive in its emptiness, felt different somehow, full of possibility rather than absence. She was still scared, still uncertain about 1,000 practical details. But underneath the fear lived something she'd almost forgotten: hope. Fragile and precious and terrifying, but unmistakably real. Her phone buzzed as she was unlocking her apartment door. A text from an unknown number. "Made it home. Couldn't wait until tomorrow to text you. Is that pathetic? This is Evan, by the way." In case that wasn't obvious, Rachel laughed, genuine and surprised by the sound. She saved his contact and replied, "Not pathetic, sweet. I'm glad you texted. Also made it home safely." His response came quickly. "Good. Get some sleep, dream of terrible coffee and excellent pie." "And brave choices," Rachel typed back. "The bravest," Evan confirmed. Rachel fell asleep with her phone still in her hand, smiling at the ceiling, feeling chosen and choosing in return. Whatever complicated navigation lay ahead, professional ethics, blended families, medical histories, and emotional scars, they would face it together. Not alone. Never alone again. Outside her window, the city woke to Saturday morning, indifferent to the small miracle that had occurred in the quiet hours of Friday night. But Rachel knew. Evan knew. And for now, that was enough. The future they were tentatively building might be complicated and uncertain and require more courage than either had left to give, but it would be theirs, chosen deliberately, pursued honestly. And after years of solitary survival, that possibility felt like everything. Rachel woke Saturday afternoon to 17 missed messages and the disorienting sensation of having slept past noon for the first time in a decade. She reached for her phone groggily, her apartment bathed in the golden light that only came when the sun had already climbed high. The messages were all from Evan, nothing urgent, just small observations about his morning with Sophie, a photo of pancakes shaped like butterflies, a link to an article about sailing lessons offered at the marina. Sophie insists these are acceptable but not restaurant quality. His text read beneath the pancake photo. Her standards are brutal. Rachel found herself smiling at her phone like a teenager, something warm and unfamiliar settling in her chest. She typed back, "They look perfect to me. But then again, I'm not a certified dessert critic." The response came immediately. "She'd be happy to train you. Fair warning, the certification process involves eating a lot of cake." "I think I can handle that challenge," Rachel replied. Her phone rang seconds later. Seeing Evan's name on the screen sent a flutter through her stomach that felt ridiculous and wonderful. "Hi," she answered, her voice still rough with sleep. "Did I wake you?" Evan sounded concerned. "I'm sorry, I thought—" "You didn't. I mean, you did, but I needed to wake up anyway." Rachel sat up against her headboard, pushing hair out of her face. "What time is it?" "Almost 2. I figured you'd be up by now, working from home or something equally workaholic." "I never sleep this late." Rachel glanced around her bedroom as if seeing it fresh. "I can't remember the last time I slept past 7, let alone into the afternoon." "Good." Evan's voice carried warmth and satisfaction. "You needed it. We were up until almost dawn." The memory of last night, this morning, flooded back with vivid clarity. The confession in her office, the diner, the way Evan had looked at her when he said he'd choose her. Rachel felt heat climb her neck. "So we were," she said softly. "How long have you been awake?" "Since 8. Sophie came home from her sleepover with enough energy to power a small city and very important information about butterflies to share." The affection in his voice was palpable. "We've had extensive discussions about metamorphosis and made pancakes and built what she assures me is an architecturally sound fairy house in the backyard." "Sounds exhausting." "It's perfect." Evan paused. "She's actually at her friend's house again right now for a birthday party. I have about 3 hours of unexpected freedom." Rachel's heart rate picked up. "Oh?" "Yeah, and I was thinking if you're not busy, maybe we could—" He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "Sorry, that's presumptuous. You probably have plans or work or—" "I don't," Rachel interrupted. "Have plans, I mean. Unless you count staring at my laptop and pretending to review quarterly reports." "Then don't do that." Evan's voice dropped lower, more intimate. "Spend the afternoon with me instead. I know we said we'd take this slow, but slow doesn't have to mean never seeing each other, right?" Rachel thought about her empty apartment, her usual Saturday routine of work and solitude. Then she thought about the possibility of 3 uninterrupted hours with Evan, continuing last night's conversation in the daylight. "Where?" she asked. "There's a botanical garden about 20 minutes from downtown. It's quiet this time of year, not crowded. We could walk, talk, actually see each other in natural light, instead of fluorescent office lighting or diner ambiance." "That sounds nice." Rachel was already mentally cataloging her closet, trying to remember what she owned that wasn't business attire. "Give me an hour to make myself presentable?" "You were plenty presentable at 4 in the morning with no makeup and exhausted eyes," Evan said. "But take whatever time you need. Text me when you're ready, and I'll pick you up." After they hung up, Rachel stood under the shower longer than necessary, letting hot water ease the tension she carried in her shoulders. The scars across her abdomen, faint now but permanent, caught her eye as they always did. She traced them with tentative fingers, remembering Evan's words from last night. "Scars aren't marks of inadequacy. They're proof of survival." She wanted to believe him, wanted to internalize that perspective and let it replace the shame she'd carried for 6 years. But decades of messaging about what made women valuable, what made bodies acceptable, was hard to override with one conversation, however sincere. Still, as she dressed carefully in dark jeans and a soft sweater, casual clothes that felt foreign after so many years of power suits, Rachel tried to see herself through Evan's eyes. Not broken, not damaged, just human, just herself. Her phone buzzed with another message. No pressure. But Sophie wants me to tell you that if you like butterflies, the botanical garden has a whole section dedicated to plants that attract them. She's very invested in your butterfly education. Rachel laughed out loud, the sound startling in her quiet apartment. Tell Sophie I appreciate her expertise and look forward to learning more. She says you're welcome and also wants to know if you prefer chocolate or vanilla cake. This is apparently very important information. Chocolate, Rachel typed. Dark chocolate, specifically. Sophie approves. She says this means you have sophisticated taste, but not in a snobby way. I have no idea where she gets this stuff. Rachel found herself grinning at her phone, enchanted by this 7-year-old she'd never met. The easy way Evan included his daughter in conversation, the obvious delight he took in her observations, made something ache pleasantly in Rachel's chest. An hour later, she waited by her apartment building's entrance, nerves fluttering in her stomach. This was different from last night's raw vulnerability. This was intentional, a deliberate choice to spend time together, to explore this connection in the clear light of day. It felt both more real and more terrifying. Evan's SUV pulled up precisely on time. He climbed out to open her door, a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that surprised her. "Hi," he said, and the smile on his face made her forget every nervous thought. "Hi yourself." He looked different in weekend clothes, jeans and a navy Henley that made his dark eyes even more striking. Less polished than in business attire, but somehow more himself. More accessible. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "I look like a normal person instead of a corporate shark," Rachel countered, but she felt pleasure warm her cheeks. "Beautiful," Evan repeated firmly. He waited until she was settled before closing her door and returning to the driver's seat. "Ready for butterfly education and excessive walking?" "As ready as I'll ever be." The drive took them out of the downtown core into quieter neighborhoods with tree-lined streets and houses that had actual yards. They talked easily about nothing important: weekend routines, favorite seasons, the strange luxury of unscheduled time. Rachel found herself relaxing into the conversation, into the passenger seat, into the possibility of this being her life now. The botanical garden sprawled across acres of carefully cultivated beauty. Evan bought their tickets from a bored teenager who didn't look up from her phone, and then they were walking gravel paths between beds of late-blooming flowers and structured hedges. "Sophie would want us to start with the butterfly garden," Evan said, gesturing toward a sign. "Fair warning, I've been here 4 times in the past month and can now identify approximately 3 species. I'm basically an expert." "Only 3?" Rachel teased. "That seems low for an expert. Monarch, swallowtail, and the orange one. My expertise has limits." They followed the path to a section dense with purple cone flowers and bright zinnias. A few butterflies drifted lazily between blooms, taking advantage of the unseasonably warm afternoon. "There," Evan pointed. "Monarch. See the orange and black pattern?" "Very impressive identification," Rachel said solemnly. "Thank you. I've worked hard to achieve this level of knowledge." He caught her hand as they walked, the gesture casual and right. "Sophie actually knows all their names. She has books. She makes me quiz her at bedtime instead of reading stories." "She sounds remarkable." "She is." Evan's thumb traced circles on the back of Rachel's hand. "She's also going to ask me a million questions about where I went today and who I was with." Rachel tensed slightly. "What will you tell her?" "The truth, that I spent the afternoon with a friend from work." Evan glanced at her. "Is that okay? I don't want to hide you, Rachel, but I also don't want to introduce the concept of dating to a 7-year-old before we're sure about what this is." "That makes sense." Rachel felt both relief and something that might have been disappointment. "We're taking it slow, figuring things out." "Exactly." Evan squeezed her hand. "But for what it's worth, I'm already sure about some things." "Like what?" "Like I want to keep doing this, spending time with you, learning who you are outside of conference rooms and quarterly reports." He led her to a bench overlooking a pond where koi drifted in lazy patterns. "Like I haven't felt this interested in someone's thoughts and dreams and fears in years, maybe ever." Rachel sat beside him, their hands still joined between them. "I'm not used to this." "To what?" "Someone wanting to know me, really know me. Most people are satisfied with the surface version, successful CEO, competent executive. They don't ask about the underneath parts." Evan turned to face her more fully. Tell me an underneath part, something nobody knows. The request was gentle but direct. Rachel considered deflecting, keeping things light and safe. Instead, she chose honesty. I'm terrified that I wasted my best years building a company instead of building a life, she said quietly. That I made the wrong choice focusing on career over relationships, and now it's too late to have the things I told myself I'd get around to eventually. Like what things? Family, partnership. Someone to come home to who actually cares if I had a good day or a terrible one. Rachel stared at the koi, watching their scales flash gold beneath the water. I told myself I'd have time later, that success would come first and everything else would follow. But success came and kept demanding more, and I kept giving it, and somewhere along the way I looked up and realized I was 42 and completely alone. You're not alone now, Evan said. Aren't I? We've known each other 3 months, really talked for one night. This could evaporate tomorrow and I'd be right back where I started. It could. Evan's honesty was bracing. I could get scared. You could decide this is too complicated. Life could throw something terrible at us that tears this apart before it really begins. He shifted closer. But it could also grow into something real and lasting. We won't know unless we're brave enough to try. Rachel finally looked at him. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying. Evan's free hand came up to cup her face. But I'd rather be terrified and trying than safe and alone. The words hit something deep in Rachel's chest. She leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the warmth of his palm against her cheek, the sincerity in his dark eyes. I'm not good at this, she whispered. At being vulnerable, at trusting someone won't leave. Then we'll practice together. Evan's thumb brushed her cheekbone. I'm not good at it either, not anymore. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we learn together. Rachel closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the tenderness he offered so freely. What if I disappoint you? What if you don't? He leaned his forehead against hers. Rachel, listen to me. I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting a real human person with flaws and complications and bad days. That's what I want. That's what I'm choosing. Why? The question came out broken. Why choose all my complications when you could find someone easier? Because easy isn't what I need. Evan pulled back enough to meet her eyes directly. I need real. I need someone who understands loss and survival and the work of rebuilding yourself after life tears you apart. I need someone strong enough to stand alone but brave enough to reach for connection anyway. That's a lot of projection onto someone you barely know. Maybe. Or maybe I recognize something in you that mirrors what I see in myself. His expression turned wry. Two people who learn to survive by being self-sufficient, now trying to figure out if they can let someone else in. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. I want to let you in. I'm just scared. So am I. Evan kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. Scared I'm not ready for this. Scared I'll mess it up. Scared of what it means to introduce someone into Sophie's life and mine. But I'm doing it anyway because the alternative, walking away from this connection, feels worse than the fear. They sat in silence for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing together. Around them, the garden continued its peaceful existence. Butterflies drifting, water flowing, fall flowers blooming toward their inevitable fade. Tell me something else, Rachel said finally. Something nobody knows about you. Evan pulled back slightly, considering. I still dream about my wife. Not every night, but often enough. And I wake up feeling guilty. Guilty for what? For being interested in someone else. For moving forward. For the fact that life continued after hers ended. He looked away. For sitting here with you feeling happy when she's been gone 3 years and will never feel anything again. Rachel's heart ached for him. That's not something to feel guilty about. I know that rationally. Emotionally is harder. Evan met her eyes again. She'd want me to be happy, to give Sophie a full life, not one shadowed by grief. But knowing that and feeling it are different things. Does Sophie remember her well? Some. She was only 4 when her mom died. The memories are fading, which breaks my heart even as I know it's natural. Evan's voice roughened. I keep photo albums, tell stories. Try to keep her mother present in our lives, but I can see her slipping away into something more like a dream than a person. And I don't know if that's healthy or sad or just inevitable. Rachel squeezed his hand. It's probably all of those things. Life doesn't come in neat categories. No, it doesn't. Evan managed a small smile. Thank you for not being weird about it. Some people get uncomfortable when I mention her. She's part of your story, part of who made you into the person sitting here. Rachel paused. I'd never expect you to erase that or pretend it didn't happen. That means more than you know. Evan stood, pulling Rachel up with him. Come on, let's keep walking. Sophie would never forgive me if we didn't see the whole butterfly section. They wandered through cultivated paths, past beds of asters and salvias, through a small bamboo grove that whispered in the breeze. The conversation flowed between serious and light, touching on childhood memories and current frustrations, dreams for the future and regrets about the past. Rachel found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone, her complicated relationship with her mother, her fear of medical recurrence, her secret wish to learn piano someday. Why haven't you? Evan asked about the piano. Time, energy, the usual excuses. Rachel shrugged. Mostly fear, probably. Fear of being bad at something after spending my whole life cultivating competence. What if being bad at something is freeing? Evan suggested. No expectations, no pressure, just the experience of learning. That sounds terrifying. Most good things do. He grinned. Take it from someone who let his 7-year-old talk him into a pottery class last month. I made the world's ugliest bowl. Sophie was mortified on my behalf. It was fantastic. Rachel laughed, genuine and surprised. You're telling me you purposely did something you were terrible at? Sophie wanted to try pottery. I wanted to support her. So we went together and made horrible misshapen things and laughed ourselves sick. Evan's expression softened. Some of my best moments as a parent have been the ones where we're equally bad at something new. It levels the playing field, makes us teammates instead of teacher and student. The image of it, father and daughter covered in clay, laughing at their own incompetence, made Rachel's chest tight with longing. That sounds wonderful. It was. Evan studied her face. What would you try if you weren't afraid of being bad at it? Rachel considered the question seriously. Besides piano? Maybe painting, or rock climbing, or cooking something more complicated than scrambled eggs. She felt heat climb her neck. I know that sounds pathetic. Successful CEO who can't cook. It sounds human. We all have gaps in our skill sets. Evan guided her toward a greenhouse at the garden's edge. I can't change a tire. I panicked during Sophie's math homework. I once burned soup. How do you burn soup? Forget it's on the stove for an hour. He held the greenhouse door open. The smoke alarm was very judgmental about the whole thing. Inside, humidity wrapped around them like a blanket. Tropical plants crowded every available space, their leaves glossy and oversized. The air smelled of earth and growth. Wow, Rachel breathed. Right? Sophie calls this the jungle room. Evan led her down the narrow central path. Claims there are definitely monkeys hiding somewhere. Have you found any? Not yet, but we keep looking. They explored the greenhouse slowly, pointing out unusual plants and reading identification plaques. Rachel found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did, her shoulders dropping from their perpetual tension, her breathing deepening. This felt easy in a way nothing in her life had felt easy in years. Can I ask you something potentially uncomfortable? Evan said after they'd been walking in comfortable silence for several minutes. Rachel tensed instinctively. Okay. The cancer. You mentioned it last night, but we didn't really talk about it. Are you okay? Medically, I mean. Is there ongoing treatment or monitoring or... I'm in remission. Rachel appreciated the directness of his question. 6 years clear. I still have checkups every 6 months, blood work and imaging to watch for recurrence. But so far, nothing. That's good. Really good. Evan paused by a massive fern. Does the monitoring stress you out? Every single time. Rachel touched a frond, feeling its delicate texture. The week before an appointment, I barely sleep. Convince myself something's wrong, that the cancer's back, that I used up all my luck the first time. She forced herself to continue. And then I get the all clear and feel stupid for being so anxious. Until the next appointment cycle starts. That's not stupid. That's trauma response. Rachel looked at him sharply. What? Trauma response. Evan repeated gently. Your body went through something catastrophic. It's protecting you by staying vigilant. That's not stupidity, Rachel. That's your nervous system doing its job. The reframing stunned her. She'd spent 6 years berating herself for anxiety, seeing it as weakness rather than reasonable response. Hearing Evan describe it as protective rather than pathological shifted something fundamental. I never thought about it that way, she admitted. I learned a lot about trauma responses after my wife died. Grief counseling for Sophie meant grief counseling for me too. Evan's hand found hers again. Our brains are wired to protect us from threats. When you've faced mortality, that protection goes into overdrive. It's not a character flaw. It's being human. Rachel felt tears threaten again. You're very understanding about all of this. I've lived adjacent to medical crisis. I know what it does to people. Evan pulled her closer. And I meant what I said last night. None of it makes you less worthy of being chosen. If anything, surviving makes you more remarkable. I don't feel remarkable. I feel damaged. Then I'll remind you as many times as you need to hear it. Evan's arms came around her fully now, holding her against his chest in the humid greenhouse air. You're not damaged. You're a warrior who survived a battle. There's a difference. Rachel let herself sink into his embrace, breathing in his scent, feeling the solid warmth of him. When was the last time someone had held her like this? Not with professional distance or polite affection, but with genuine care and tenderness? Thank you, she whispered against his shoulder. For what? For not running. For not deciding I'm too complicated. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. For choosing me anyway. Always anyway, Evan said. Then he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, a question more than a statement. Rachel froze for a half-second of surprise before melting into it, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders. The kiss deepened gradually, unhurried, as if they had all the time in the world to explore this new intimacy. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Evan rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since last night, he admitted. Why didn't you? Wanted to make sure you wanted it too. Wanted it to be a clear choice, not just midnight vulnerability. His hands framed her face. Was that okay? More than okay. Rachel managed a shaky laugh. Though maybe we should continue this somewhere less public than a botanical garden greenhouse. Probably wise. Evan glanced around at the empty space. Though I don't see any witnesses except the plants. The plants are very judgmental. Terrible gossips, plants. He kissed her again, quick and sweet. Come on, we should probably head back anyway. I need to pick up Sophie in an hour. They walked back through the gardens, hand in hand, the afternoon sun slanting golden through the trees. Rachel felt different somehow, lighter, more hopeful, like something locked tight inside her had finally loosened. The fear hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had quieted enough to let other emotions through. In the parking lot, Evan opened her car door again with that same old-fashioned courtesy. Before she climbed in, Rachel caught his hand. Thank you for today, she said. For this. For being patient with me. Thank you for trying. Evan kissed her knuckles. For being brave enough to let me in. The drive back to her apartment building felt too short. Rachel found herself wishing for traffic, for delays, for anything to extend this suspended time where they existed in their own bubble away from professional obligations and complicated realities. So, Evan said as he pulled up to her building, what happens next? Monday, we talk to HR, Rachel said. Make this official and compliant. And between now and Monday? Rachel considered. Maybe you text me goodnight. Maybe we figure out when we're both free again. Maybe we keep doing exactly what we're doing, taking it slow and seeing where it goes. I can work with that. Evan caught her hand before she could open the door. Rachel, I really like you. I want you to know that. This isn't casual for me. It's not casual for me either. She squeezed his fingers, which is terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. The best things usually are. Rachel leaned across the console to kiss him one more time, brief and promising. Then she forced herself to pull away and climb out of the car before she could change her mind and ask him to stay. She watched him drive away, her lips still tingling from their kisses, her heart fuller than it had been in years. Inside her apartment, the silence felt different than before. Not oppressive, but peaceful. Room to breathe and process and simply be. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Made it approximately 1 block before missing you. This is either very romantic or slightly pathetic. Rachel smiled at the screen. Romantic. Definitely romantic. Good. Because I'm already thinking about when I can see you again. Me too, Rachel admitted. She spent the evening in a pleasant haze, accomplishing nothing productive but feeling more content than she had in recent memory. Evan sent periodic updates, picking up Sophie from the birthday party, hearing detailed accounts of cake quality and party game rankings, making dinner while Sophie explained butterfly metamorphosis in excruciating scientific detail. She wants to know if you've ever seen a chrysalis in real life. He texted around 8. I haven't. Should I admit this, or will it lower her opinion of me? She says this is understandable, but must be corrected immediately. Apparently we're going chrysalis hunting next weekend if you're interested. The casual inclusion in future plans made Rachel's chest warm. I would love that. Fair warning, it involves a lot of examining trees and bushes. Sophie takes it very seriously. I can be serious about chrysalis hunting. Excellent. It's a date. Well, a date with a 7-year-old chaperone who will absolutely judge our technique. Rachel laughed out loud, alone in her apartment but feeling connected anyway. This strange new reality. Text conversations about butterflies, plans that included a child she'd never met. The sense of building something real felt both foreign and exactly right. That night she fell asleep earlier than usual, her phone on the pillow beside her. Evan's goodnight message the last thing she read. Sleep well. Dream of butterfly gardens and new possibilities. I'm really glad I stayed late Friday night. Me too, Rachel typed back. Me too. Monday morning arrived with the weight of reality. Rachel sat in her office an hour before most employees arrived, reviewing the disclosure forms she'd need to submit to HR. The document felt simultaneously straightforward and terrifying. A simple declaration that she was pursuing a romantic relationship with an employee, along with proposed measures to prevent any conflict of interest. On paper, it was clean and professional. In practice, it meant exposing something private and vulnerable to corporate scrutiny. Her phone buzzed with a text from Evan. Already here, sitting in my car trying to remember how to breathe like a normal person. Is it too late to run away and join the circus? Rachel smiled despite her nerves. Pretty sure the circus has disclosure requirements too. Damn. There goes my backup plan. Meet you at HR in 10 minutes? I'll be there. Rachel gathered the forms, checked her reflection one final time, and headed toward the Human Resources Department on the 3rd floor. Her heels clicked against polished floors, the sound echoing in the early morning quiet. She found Evan already waiting outside Jennifer Martinez's office, looking uncomfortable in a way she'd never seen him during normal business operations. Hey, he said softly. Hey yourself. Rachel wanted to reach for his hand but kept her arms at her sides. Not yet. Not until they'd made this official. Ready? Absolutely not. You? Terrified. She managed a small smile. But let's do it anyway. Jennifer Martinez, their head of HR, was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd been with the company since its early days. She greeted them with professional warmth, gesturing to the chairs across from her desk. Rachel, Evan, thank you for coming in. I understand you have something you'd like to disclose? Rachel had rehearsed this moment a dozen times over the weekend, but her carefully prepared speech evaporated the moment she needed it. Instead, she said simply, Evan and I have begun a personal relationship. We want to ensure we handle this appropriately and ethically, given our professional positions. Jennifer's expression remained neutral. I appreciate you coming forward proactively. Can you tell me more about the nature of this relationship and how long it's been developing? Evan leaned forward slightly. We've worked together for 3 months in a professional capacity. The personal connection developed recently, this past weekend specifically. We haven't been hiding anything. We're here now because we want to do this right. And what is the reporting structure between you two? Jennifer directed the question to both of them. Evan reports to Michael Chen, who reports to me, Rachel said. There's no direct supervisory relationship, but there is an indirect chain of command that we recognize could create conflicts. Jennifer made notes on her tablet. What measures are you proposing to mitigate potential conflicts of interest? Rachel had anticipated this question. I'm suggesting that Evan's performance reviews and compensation decisions be handled entirely by Michael, with oversight from the board's compensation committee rather than myself. Any projects that would require extensive collaboration between us should have additional oversight. And we're both committed to maintaining absolute professionalism in the workplace. We understand this is complicated, Evan added, but we're willing to do whatever's necessary to ensure it doesn't impact the company or create any ethical issues. Jennifer studied them both for a long moment. I'm going to be direct with you. Office romances, particularly those involving different levels of authority, can create significant problems. Perceptions of favoritism, concerns about consent given power dynamics, potential liability if things go poorly. She paused. That said, you're both adults. You've come forward immediately, rather than attempting to hide the relationship. And you're proposing reasonable safeguards. Rachel felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. Here's what I need from both of you, Jennifer continued. First, written confirmation that this relationship is consensual and not the result of any pressure or coercion related to workplace authority. Second, agreement to the modified reporting structure Rachel outlined. Third, commitment to maintaining professional boundaries during work hours. And fourth, understanding that if this relationship ends, you'll both handle it maturely without allowing personal feelings to impact professional conduct. We can do all of that, Rachel said firmly. Evan? Jennifer looked at him directly. Absolutely. I want to be clear that Rachel has never used her position inappropriately. This relationship developed naturally between two people who happened to meet at work. I'm here completely by choice. Jennifer nodded slowly. All right. I'll draw up the necessary documentation. You'll both need to sign acknowledgement forms. I'll brief the executive team, not about personal details, but about the fact that a relationship exists and measures are being taken. Expect some gossip once word gets out. People talk. I understand, Rachel said, though the thought of becoming office gossip made her stomach turn. One more thing. Jennifer's expression softened slightly. I've known you a long time, Rachel. I've seen you build this company from almost nothing. You deserve happiness in your personal life, and I'm not going to make that unnecessarily difficult. But I do need you both to be smart about this. The company you've built is too important to risk on poor judgment. Thank you, Jennifer. Rachel meant it. We'll be careful. After they left HR, Rachel and Evan walked toward the elevators in silence. Only when the doors closed on an empty car did Evan finally speak. That was less terrible than I expected. The calm before the storm, Rachel said. Once people start talking, it's going to get uncomfortable. Let them talk. Evan caught her hand briefly before the elevator stopped at his floor. We did the right thing. We're being transparent and responsible. That's all we can control. I know, doesn't make it less nerve-wracking. The doors opened and Evan stepped out, turning back to face her. Dinner tonight? He asked. My place? Sophie's been asking when she gets to meet my friend from work, and I think maybe it's time. If you're ready. Rachel's heart jumped into her throat. Meeting his daughter felt monumental, a step that would make this relationship real in an entirely new way. Are you sure? We've only been doing this for 3 days. I'm sure that I don't want to keep you separate from the most important part of my life, and I'm sure that Sophie is going to ask increasingly pointed questions until I introduce you. Evan smiled. No pressure. If it's too soon, we can wait. Rachel thought about it, really thought about it. Meeting Sophie meant acknowledging this relationship had longevity potential, that they were building towards something lasting. It meant being vulnerable to a child's judgment and stepping into Evan's family life in a tangible way. Every logical instinct told her it was too fast, too risky, too much. What time should I be there? She heard herself say. Evan's smile could have lit the entire building. 6? I'll cook. Sophie will provide entertainment and probably ask you 1,000 questions. I'll be there. The elevator doors closed on Evan's delighted expression, carrying Rachel up to the executive floor. She had approximately 9 hours to prepare herself for meeting a 7-year-old who might determine the entire future of this relationship. No pressure at all. The workday passed in a blur of meetings and strategic planning, but Rachel's mind kept wandering to the evening ahead. What did one wear to meet their boyfriend's child for the first time? The word boyfriend felt strange, even in her thoughts. Too casual for what Evan was becoming to her, too juvenile for people in their late 30s and early 40s. But partner felt presumptuous after 3 days, and person I'm seeing felt reductive. Around 3, her phone buzzed with a text from Evan. Sophie wants to know if you have any food allergies or things you hate. She's very concerned about menu planning. Rachel smiled at her desk. No allergies. I'm not picky. Whatever you're planning will be great. She says that's a good attitude and you're already passing tests. I'm not sure what tests those are, but apparently you're doing well. Tell her I said thank you. She says you're welcome and also asks if you've seen any chrysalises yet. This child is relentless about butterfly education. Not yet, but I've been looking. She approves of your dedication. See you at 6. Rachel left work at 5, drove home to change into casual clothes that felt appropriate for meeting a child. Dark jeans, a soft blue sweater, nothing too formal or intimidating. She studied her reflection, trying to see herself through a 7-year-old's eyes. Would Sophie like her? Resent her presence in her father's life? Feel protective of her mother's memory? The drive to Evan's house took her into a family-friendly neighborhood with sidewalks and basketball hoops and driveways. His home was a modest 2-story with a well-kept yard and a wooden porch swing. Rachel sat in her car for a full minute, gathering courage, before finally forcing herself to walk to the front door. She'd barely knocked when it flew open to reveal a small girl with wild, dark curls barely contained by a butterfly-shaped hair clip. Sophie Brooks had her father's warm brown eyes and an expression of intense scrutiny that would have been intimidating on an adult. "You're Rachel," Sophie announced. "Dad said you were coming at 6 exactly, and it's 5:58, so you're early. That's good. Punctuality is important." "Sophie, let her come inside before you start the interrogation." Evan appeared behind his daughter, looking amused and slightly apologetic. "Sorry, subtle isn't really her strong suit." "I don't see why I should be subtle," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "You're dating my dad. I should know things about you." Rachel couldn't help but smile. "That seems fair. What would you like to know?" Sophie stepped back to let Rachel enter, then studied her with unnerving intensity. "Do you like butterflies?" "I'm learning to appreciate them. Your dad took me to the botanical garden and showed me the butterfly section." "Did you see any monarchs?" Sophie's eyes lit up. "They're my favorite because they migrate thousands of miles, and that's very impressive for something so small." "We did see monarchs, and your dad told me you're an expert on butterfly metamorphosis." "I know a lot about it," Sophie said modestly. "I could teach you if you want. I have books and diagrams, and Dad says I'm a natural educator, which I think means I'm good at explaining things." "I would love to learn from you." Evan caught Rachel's eye over Sophie's head, his expression grateful and tender. "Come on in. Dinner's almost ready. Sophie, why don't you show Rachel your butterfly collection while I finish up?" Sophie grabbed Rachel's hand with surprising confidence and led her into the living room. The space was comfortable and lived in, with mismatched furniture and evidence of active childhood everywhere. Art supplies on the coffee table, books stacked haphazardly on shelves, photographs covering nearly every surface. Rachel's eyes caught on a large framed photo above the mantel. A beautiful woman with Sophie's curls and bright smile, clearly taken before illness had stolen her vitality. Evan's late wife. The woman whose absence had shaped this household's present. "That's my mom," Sophie said, following Rachel's gaze. "She died when I was little. I don't remember her much, but Dad tells me stories." Rachel's heart clenched. "She looks lovely." "Dad says I look like her. He says it's like having a piece of her still here." Sophie said it matter-of-factly, without apparent sadness. "But I don't think that makes him sad anymore. I think it makes him happy." "Do you think it makes him happy or sad?" The question was so direct, so searching, that Rachel had to take a moment to formulate an honest answer. "I think it probably makes him both. Happy to see her in you, sad that she's not here. People can feel two things at once." Sophie considered this seriously. That makes sense. I feel two things a lot. Like I'm happy we moved here because I like my new school, but sad we left Boston where mom is buried. Is that normal? Very normal. Rachel knelt down to Sophie's eye level. It's okay to have complicated feelings about things. That's part of being human. That's what my grief counselor says too. Sophie brightened. Okay, come see my butterflies. I have 17 specimens, and I can tell you about all of them. The butterfly collection turned out to be a careful arrangement of photographs, drawings, and pressed flowers that attracted butterflies. Sophie walked Rachel through each one with the seriousness of a museum docent, explaining migration patterns and life cycles and which plants served which purposes. Rachel found herself genuinely engaged, charmed by this small person's enthusiasm and expertise. "You're a very good teacher," Rachel said when Sophie finally paused for breath. "I've learned more about butterflies in 10 minutes than I knew in my entire life." "Thank you. I practice a lot." Sophie studied Rachel with that same intense scrutiny from earlier. "Can I ask you something kind of personal?" "Sure." "Do you like my dad? Like really like him? Not just being polite?" Rachel met the child's eyes directly, recognizing the importance of this moment. "I really like him. He's kind and smart and makes me laugh. I enjoy spending time with him." "Good. Because he really likes you too. He smiles at his phone when you text him, and he got fancy coffee this morning, even though he usually drinks it black because he was nervous about seeing you." Sophie leaned in conspiratorially. "He wants you to like me. That's why he cleaned the whole house yesterday and made me practice my table manners." "Did he?" Rachel found herself smiling. "Well, I already like you. You're smart and interesting and clearly very knowledgeable about butterflies." "I'm also sometimes bossy and I talk too much and I have opinions about everything," Sophie said with brutal honesty. "Dad says those are good things, but some people find me a lot." "I think those are excellent qualities," Rachel said firmly. "The world needs more girls who are confident and knowledgeable and willing to share their opinions." Sophie's entire face lit up. "I like you too. You can stay for dinner." "I'm honored." Evan called them to the kitchen, where he'd set the table with what looked like his nicest dishes. Dinner was simple but perfect. Roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread. Sophie kept up a steady stream of conversation throughout the meal, asking Rachel questions about her job, her apartment, whether she'd ever seen a comet. "Sophie," Evan said gently after the 20th question, "maybe let Rachel actually eat some of her dinner?" "It's fine," Rachel assured him. "I don't mind." "See, Dad?" "She doesn't mind." Sophie speared a piece of broccoli. "Rachel, do you have any kids?" The question landed like a physical blow. Rachel felt her chest tighten, her throat close. Evan's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. "No," Rachel managed. "I don't have children." "Why not? Don't you want them?" Sophie's question was innocent, curious, without any awareness of the minefield she'd just stepped into. "Sophie," Evan said quietly, "that's a pretty personal question. But you said I could ask Rachel things to get to know her better." "Some things are more private than others, honey." Sophie looked between them, clearly sensing she'd touched something sensitive. "I'm sorry. Did I ask something wrong?" Rachel took a shaky breath, forcing herself to meet the child's worried eyes. "You didn't do anything wrong. It's just a complicated answer." She paused, deciding how much honesty was appropriate. "I got very sick when I was younger. Because of that sickness, I can't have children. It makes me sad sometimes, but it's okay. Life doesn't always go the way we plan." Sophie's expression crumpled with concern. "I'm sorry you got sick. That's really sad." "Thank you for saying that." Rachel was surprised to find her voice steady. "But I'm healthy now, and that's what matters. Dad got sick too. Well, not him. Mom did, and then she died." Sophie said it with the bluntness only children possessed. "It's really hard when people get sick." "It is," Rachel agreed quietly. Sophie reached across the table to pat Rachel's hand in a gesture so earnest and compassionate it made Rachel's eyes sting. "But you're okay now. And Dad's okay. And I'm okay. So maybe it's all going to be fine." "I think you might be right," Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. Evan squeezed her hand again under the table, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. The rest of dinner passed more quietly, Sophie seeming to sense that she needed to dial back her intensity. After they'd finished eating, she asked if Rachel wanted to see her room. "Only if it's okay with your dad," Rachel said. "It's fine with me." Evan started clearing dishes. "Fair warning, Rach. It's very pink and very butterfly-themed." Sophie's room was indeed aggressively pink, with butterfly decals covering one wall and a canopy bed draped in sheer fabric. Books overflowed from shelves, stuffed animals crowded every surface, and artwork covered the walls in haphazard layers. "This is amazing," Rachel said honestly. "It's very you." "I decorated it myself. Well, Dad helped with the high parts." Sophie flopped onto her bed. "Can I tell you a secret?" "If you want to." "I was scared to meet you. I thought you might be mean or boring, or that you wouldn't like me, and then Dad would have to choose, and he'd choose you because adults always choose other adults over kids." The words tumbled out in a rush. "But you're nice. And you listen to my butterfly information, even though most grown-ups pretend to listen, but really they're just being polite. And you were honest about the sick thing, even though it made you sad." Rachel sat on the edge of Sophie's bed, profoundly moved. "Can I tell you a secret?" Sophie nodded eagerly. "I was terrified to meet you. I thought you might hate me or think I was trying to replace your mom, or that I wasn't good enough for your dad." Rachel smiled slightly. "But you're wonderful, smart and kind and honest. Your dad is lucky to have you." "We're both lucky," Sophie said seriously. "Do you think you'll keep dating him? Like for a long time?" "I hope so, if things keep going well." "Good. Because he's been really lonely since Mom died. He tries to hide it, but I notice things. And I think you're lonely too, maybe. So maybe you can be not lonely together." The observation was so astute, so painfully accurate, that Rachel had to swallow hard against sudden tears. "That's very wise." "I'm wise beyond my years," Sophie said solemnly. "My teacher said so at parent conferences." Rachel laughed, genuine and surprised. "I bet she did." They rejoined Evan in the kitchen, where he'd finished cleaning up and was making coffee. Sophie immediately launched into a detailed account of her day at school, including what sounded like complex second-grade politics involving playground equipment and recess allocation. Evan listened with the practiced attention of someone who'd learned that every detail mattered in a child's world. Rachel watched them together. The easy affection, the private jokes, the way Evan anticipated Sophie's needs before she voiced them. This was what family looked like, what partnership in parenting meant, and she wasn't part of it, not really, no matter how welcoming they'd been tonight. The thought came with a sharp pang of longing. This could have been her life, in some alternate universe where cancer hadn't stolen her fertility. Parent-teacher conferences and bedtime negotiations and the specific exhaustion that came from being needed constantly. Instead, she was perpetually outside looking in, welcomed as a guest, but never truly belonging. "Rachel?" Evan's voice pulled her from the spiral. "You okay?" She forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" Before she could answer, Sophie interjected, "Dad, it's almost bedtime. Can Rachel stay for stories?" Evan glanced at Rachel questioningly. "Only if she wants to. No pressure." "I'd like that," Rachel said, meaning it. Sophie's bedtime routine was elaborate. Pajamas, teeth brushing, the selection of exactly 3 stuffed animals to sleep with, a detailed review of tomorrow's schedule. Rachel stood in the doorway of Sophie's bathroom, watching Evan navigate each step with patient efficiency. "You're really good at this," she said quietly. 3 years of practice. You develop systems." Evan helped Sophie spit out toothpaste. Though she still tries to negotiate every single night about whether water counts as brushing teeth. "It's mostly water," Sophie argued. "The toothpaste is just flavoring." "Nice try. Actual brushing, please." Finally, Sophie was settled in her bed with her chosen stuffed animals arranged precisely. Evan sat on one side, gesturing for Rachel to take the chair nearby. Sophie selected a book from her nightstand, something about a caterpillar who wanted to fly, and handed it to her father. "Dad does the voices," Sophie explained to Rachel. "He's really good at them." Evan read with impressive commitment, giving each character distinct voices and inflections. Sophie listened with rapt attention despite obviously knowing the story by heart, occasionally correcting details or adding commentary. Rachel found herself mesmerized by the intimacy of it, this nightly ritual, this small pocket of connection before sleep. When the story ended, Sophie demanded one more, then one more after that. Finally, Evan put his foot down. That's 3 stories, Soph. Time for sleep. But Rachel just got here. We're still bonding. You can bond more another time. Sleep now. Evan kissed her forehead. I love you to the moon. And back, Sophie finished automatically. Then she looked at Rachel. Will you come back? Not just tomorrow, but lots of times? Rachel felt her throat tighten. I'd like that very much. Good, because I have 17 more butterfly books and you need to read all of them to be properly educated. That sounds like a lot of homework. Education is important, Sophie said seriously. Then she grinned. Good night, Rachel. I'm glad Dad picked you. I'm glad he picked me too, Rachel whispered. Evan dimmed the lights and pulled the door mostly closed, leaving it cracked as they stepped into the hallway. Rachel leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions from the past few hours. She's incredible, Rachel said softly. She liked you. Evan moved closer. Really liked you. That was the easiest bedtime routine we've had in months. Usually there's way more negotiation involved. I liked her too. She's smart and funny and so completely herself. She is. Evan studied Rachel's face. But you're upset. What's wrong? Rachel debated deflecting, keeping it light. Instead, she chose honesty. Watching you two together, seeing what you have, it made me realize what I've lost, what I'll never have. She forced herself to continue. I can't give you more children, Evan. I can't be pregnant or give birth or experience any of that. If you wanted to expand your family someday, I couldn't be part of that. Rachel, Evan cupped her face gently. I don't want more children. I have Sophie. She's enough, more than enough. And the idea that you think you're somehow inadequate because you can't have kids, that breaks my heart. But if you change your mind, I won't. His voice was firm. I'm 38 years old. I've already done the baby years, the toddler years, all of it. I'm not looking to start over. I'm looking to build a life with someone who gets that my daughter is my priority and is okay with that. I am okay with it, Rachel said. She's wonderful, but I'm scared that someday you'll resent what I can't give you. Stop. Evan's thumb brushed away the tear sliding down her cheek. Listen to me. I know what I want. I know what I can handle. And I'm choosing you, not some hypothetical future where I have more kids. You, right now, exactly as you are. Rachel leaned into his touch, wanting desperately to believe him. I'm sorry. I know I'm being irrational. You're being human. You're processing trauma and loss and trying to figure out if you can trust this. Evan pulled her into his arms. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. They stood in the hallway for a long moment, Rachel drawing strength from his solid presence. Downstairs, the house settled into evening quiet. Through Sophie's cracked door came the sound of gentle breathing, already asleep despite claiming she was too excited to sleep. Come on, Evan said softly. Let's go downstairs. I'll make you tea and we can actually talk without a 7-year-old audience. In the kitchen, Evan prepared tea while Rachel settled at the small table. The space felt lived in and comfortable, so different from her sterile apartment. Evidence of family life everywhere, Sophie's artwork on the refrigerator, a calendar covered in color-coded activities, permission slips, and school notices held by magnets. This was my wife's house, Evan said quietly, following Rachel's gaze. We bought it together when Sophie was a baby. Sometimes I think about moving, starting completely fresh, but Sophie loves it here. Her memories of her mother are tied to this place. It feels like a home, Rachel said. Warm, lived in. It's messy. Evan set tea in front of her. I'm constantly finding goldfish crackers in weird places, and there's probably Lego hidden in every corner. Your apartment is probably immaculate. Immaculate and empty. Rachel wrapped her hands around the warm mug. I don't have goldfish crackers or Lego. I have expensive furniture I never use and artwork I bought because it matched my color scheme. We could fix that. Evan sat across from her. Add some life to your space. Or you could spend more time here, if you wanted. Make this place yours too, eventually. The offer was huge, weighted with implications. Rachel looked around the kitchen, imagining herself here regularly. cooking breakfast for Sophie, helping with homework at this table, becoming part of the fabric of their daily life. "I'd like that," she said carefully, but slowly, making sure Sophie's comfortable with how things are changing. "Agreed. Her well-being comes first, always." Evan reached across the table for Rachel's hand. "But I think she's already attached to you. Did you see how she kept finding excuses to show you things? That's her way of bonding." "The butterfly books." 17 volumes of intense Lepidoptera information. Evan grinned. "She's going to hold you to that education promise." "I'm genuinely looking forward to it." Rachel surprised herself by meaning it. "She's special, Evan. The way she processes grief, her emotional intelligence, it's remarkable for her age. 3 years of counseling and a lot of honest conversations." Evan's expression turned serious. "I refuse to let her grow up thinking feelings are shameful or weakness. She gets to be sad about her mother, angry about what she lost, scared of more loss. All of it. You're a good father." "I'm trying. Failing half the time, probably. But trying." They talked until nearly midnight, comfortable and unhurried. Rachel felt herself relaxing into the space, into the possibilities this relationship represented. When she finally stood to leave, Evan walked her to her car. "Thank you for tonight," he said, leaning against her car door, "for being patient with Sophie, for handling her questions with such honesty. Thank you for including me." Rachel looked up at his face in the porch light. "For trusting me with the most important part of your life." Evan kissed her softly, tenderly. "Same time Wednesday? Sophie wants to make you dinner. Fair warning, her specialty is spaghetti with way too much cheese." "Sounds perfect." Rachel drove home with a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Sophie's voice echoed in her mind. "Maybe you can be not lonely together." Such simple wisdom from such a small person. And maybe, just maybe, it was exactly that simple. Her phone buzzed as she was unlocking her apartment. "Sophie wants you to know she's named a stuffed butterfly after you. You're officially part of the collection now." Rachel laughed out loud, typing back, "I'm honored. What's my butterfly name? Rachel the Resilient. She says it's because you survived being sick and that makes you strong, like monarchs surviving their migration." Tears stung Rachel's eyes. Good tears this time. "Tell her that's the best compliment I've ever received." "Will do." "Sleep well, Rach." "Tonight was perfect. It really was," Rachel agreed. She fell asleep thinking about butterfly books and 7-year-old wisdom and the possibility of building something real from broken pieces. For the first time in 6 years, the future felt less like something to survive and more like something worth reaching for. The next 3 weeks unfolded with a rhythm Rachel hadn't known she was missing. Wednesday dinners at Evan's house became routine, with Sophie presiding over meal planning like a tiny executive chef. Weekend mornings found them at parks or museums, Sophie narrating every experience with her characteristic intensity, while Rachel and Evan traded glances over her head, equal parts exhausted and enchanted. At work, they maintained careful professionalism, their relationship an open secret that generated whispers but no real problems. Rachel was learning the geography of their lives, that Sophie refused to wear anything but purple socks on Tuesdays for reasons she couldn't articulate, that Evan made terrible coffee but excellent pancakes, that grief still ambushed them both at unexpected moments. She was learning to be part of something larger than herself, to consider 2 other people's needs alongside her own, to build space in her carefully controlled life for beautiful chaos. It felt right. It felt terrifying. It felt like everything she'd convinced herself she didn't need. Then, on a Thursday morning in early November, everything shifted. Rachel was in a board meeting when her phone vibrated insistently against the table. She glanced down, intending to silence it, and saw Evan's name. He never called during work hours, never interrupted unless something was wrong. "Excuse me," she said to the assembled executives, stepping out of the conference room with her heart already hammering. "I need to take this." She answered in the hallway. "Evan? What's wrong?" "I'm sorry to call during your meeting, but I didn't know who else—" His voice was strained, barely controlled. "My building manager just called. There's a gas leak in my house. They've evacuated the entire block. I can't get Sophie from school for another hour because I'm stuck in client meetings I can't leave, and they're saying we can't go back for at least 2 days while they make repairs." Rachel's mind immediately shifted into crisis management mode. Where's Sophie now? Still at school. They close at 3. I've called everyone I know here, but we haven't been in town long enough to have a deep network, and he took a shaky breath. I'm asking too much. I know I am. But could you possibly pick her up, just until I can get there? Of course. Text me the school address and what I need to know. I'll handle it. Rachel, I'm so sorry to put this on you. Don't apologize. This is what people do for each other. She was already walking toward her office, mentally rearranging her afternoon. Text me everything. I'll get Sophie and we'll figure out the rest together. After they hung up, Rachel stood in her office for a moment, processing. Picking up Sophie wasn't the issue. She'd do that gladly. But the housing situation presented a bigger problem. Evan and Sophie needed somewhere to stay, possibly for several days. Hotels with a 7-year-old were expensive and impractical. His sparse network of local friends were all work colleagues without space for unexpected guests, which left one obvious option that made Rachel's stomach clench with a mixture of anticipation and terror. She could offer her apartment. It was enormous, far too large for one person. 3 bedrooms she never used. A kitchen that rarely saw real cooking, space that echoed with emptiness most nights. Practically speaking, it made perfect sense. Emotionally speaking, it meant inviting Evan and Sophie into her most private space, blurring boundaries they'd been maintaining carefully, accelerating their relationship in ways she wasn't sure she was ready for. But Evan needed help. Sophie needed stability. And relationships meant showing up when things got complicated, not just during carefully orchestrated dates. Rachel pulled out her phone and texted, "My apartment has plenty of space. You and Sophie should stay with me until your house is habitable again." The response came immediately. "Are you sure? That's a huge ask." "I'm sure. We'll talk logistics when I pick up Sophie. Focus on your meetings, thank you. Seriously, you're saving my life right now." Rachel spent the next hour delegating urgent tasks and clearing her schedule, then drove to Sophie's elementary school with instructions from Evan about pickup procedures. The building was cheerful and chaotic, children everywhere in various states of outdoor play. Rachel found the main office and explained the situation to a skeptical secretary who required 3 forms of verification before finally agreeing to release Sophie. Sophie emerged from her classroom looking worried, her small face brightening when she saw Rachel. "Dad said there's something wrong with our house," she said, skipping the greeting entirely. "Is it bad? Are we going to be homeless?" "Not homeless." Rachel knelt to Sophie's eye level. "There's a gas leak that needs to be repaired, so you can't stay there for a few days, but you're going to stay with me until it's fixed." Sophie's eyes widened. "At your apartment? The one Dad says is very nice, in that voice he uses when he means expensive?" Rachel laughed despite the tension. "That's the one. It has a guest room that could be yours for now. Would that be okay?" "I guess so." Sophie chewed her bottom lip. "But I don't have any of my stuff. My pajamas and my butterfly books and Rachel the Resilient." The mention of the stuffed butterfly named after her made Rachel's chest tight. "We'll figure out what you need. For tonight, we can make it work. And tomorrow your dad can get things from your house once it's safe." They drove to Rachel's apartment building. Sophie pressed against the window watching the city slide past. Rachel tried to see her space through the child's eyes. The doorman who greeted them formally, the marble lobby with its expensive art, the elevator that required a key card for the penthouse level. "This is really fancy," Sophie whispered as they stepped into Rachel's apartment, "like hotel fancy." "It's just where I live." But Rachel heard the truth in Sophie's observation. Her apartment was beautiful and sterile, designed for impressive photographs rather than actual living. White furniture, glass surfaces, everything precisely placed. It looked like a magazine spread. It looked like no one really lived there. "Where's all your stuff?" Sophie asked, turning in a slow circle. "Like pictures and books and things that make it yours?" Rachel looked around with fresh eyes, seeing the emptiness Sophie identified so easily. "I guess I don't have much personal stuff here." "That's sad." Sophie's blunt honesty was somehow not unkind. A home should have things that make you happy to look at. That's what Dad says anyway. Your dad is right about a lot of things. Rachel set down her bag, suddenly uncertain. "Come on, let me show you the guest room. You can decide if it works for you." The guest room was as impersonal as the rest of the apartment. Neutral colors, expensive linens, zero personality. Sophie stood in the doorway looking doubtful. It's very clean, she said diplomatically. Too clean? Maybe a little bit. Sophie ventured further inside, touching the duvet cautiously. It doesn't feel like anyone's room. It feels like a museum. Rachel couldn't argue with that assessment. Well, it's yours for now. We can make it more comfortable. What do you need? Sophie considered seriously. My stuffed animals, my pajamas with the butterflies on them, my books, and maybe a nightlight because I don't like being too dark in places I don't know. I can do a nightlight. Rachel pulled out her phone. Let me text your dad and see what else we can get. Evan's response was apologetic and grateful in equal measure. He'd be there by 6 with whatever he could grab from the house during the brief window they'd allowed residents to collect essentials. In the meantime, Rachel was on her own with a 7-year-old in an apartment designed for solitary adult living. Are you hungry? Rachel asked. I could make you a snack. What kind of snacks do you have? Rachel opened her refrigerator, confronting its sparse contents with embarrassment. Yogurt, some wilted lettuce, condiments, and a bottle of wine. The pantry was equally depressing. Coffee, protein bars, and emergency crackers. I don't really keep much food here, she admitted. I usually eat at work or order in. Sophie looked genuinely concerned. How do you survive? Dad says regular meals are important for growing bodies. You're not growing anymore, but still. That's a very good point. Rachel pulled out her phone again. How do you feel about ordering groceries? We could get supplies for dinner and breakfast. Can we get chocolate milk? Dad says it's too much sugar, but maybe you have different rules. Rachel found herself smiling. I think we can manage chocolate milk. What else? They spent 20 minutes building an online grocery order, Sophie selecting items with careful consideration while Rachel added adult necessities. By the time they finished, Rachel had ordered more food than she typically kept in her apartment for a month. This is kind of fun, Sophie said, watching Rachel complete the order. Like playing house, but real. Have you ever stayed somewhere that wasn't your house before, besides hotels? Sophie shook her head. After Mom died, it was just me and Dad. We don't really have family nearby. Grandma and Grandpa visit sometimes, but they live far away. The loneliness in that statement echoed Rachel's own experience. I don't have much family either. My parents retired to Florida. I see them maybe once a year. That's sad. Sophie studied her with those two perceptive eyes. Were you lonely before you met Dad? The question landed with unexpected force. Rachel sat down on her pristine white sofa, gesturing for Sophie to join her. Very lonely, she admitted. I spent a lot of time by myself, worked long hours, didn't have many close friends. Is that why your apartment is so empty? Because you were too lonely to put things in it? Out of the mouths of children came devastating accuracy. Maybe. I think I convinced myself I didn't need those things, that being successful was enough. But it wasn't, Sophie said matter-of-factly, because you're still here with us now, which means you wanted something else. Rachel felt tears threaten. You're very wise for 7 years old. I've had to think about hard things, like why Mom died and what that means and how to be okay anyway. Sophie leaned against Rachel's shoulder in a gesture of casual affection that made Rachel's breath catch. Dad says hard things make you either bitter or better, and we choose better. Your dad is a smart man. I know, he's the best. Sophie tilted her head up. But I think he needs someone who's the best too. Someone who understands about hard things and choosing better. Sophie, I'm just saying you seem like you choose better, even when you're scared. Sophie's hand found Rachel's. It's okay to be scared, you know. I'm scared a lot, but you do the thing anyway. Rachel squeezed the small hand in hers, overwhelmed by this child's emotional intelligence and generosity. Thank you for saying that. The groceries arrived an hour later. Rachel and Sophie unpacked together, Sophie offering running commentary on proper pantry organization and the importance of putting vegetables in the crisper drawer. The apartment slowly became less sterile, more lived in as they worked. We should make cookies, Sophie announced, surveying their supplies, for when Dad gets here. He likes chocolate chip. I've never made cookies from scratch. Rachel felt compelled to admit this. I'm not much of a baker. Sophie looked delighted rather than discouraged. I can teach you. I help Dad all the time. I'm excellent at measuring and stirring. They found a recipe on Rachel's tablet and set to work. Sophie took her role as instructor seriously, explaining proper measuring technique and the importance of room temperature butter. Rachel found herself laughing as flour dusted every surface and chocolate chips somehow ended up everywhere except the bowl. "This is messier than I expected," Rachel said, looking at her previously pristine kitchen. "Cooking is always messy. That's part of the fun." Sophie cracked an egg with surprising competence. "Mom used to say a clean kitchen means you're not really cooking, just pretending." The casual mention of her mother, woven into the present moment, made Rachel's chest ache. "She sounds like she was wonderful." "I think so. I don't remember everything, but I remember she laughed a lot. And she made really good pancakes." Sophie measured vanilla carefully. "Do you think it's okay that I don't remember more?" Rachel knelt beside her, taking the measuring spoon gently. "I think it's very okay. You were little, but the things you do remember, the laughter, the pancakes, those are good things to keep." "That's what Dad says, too." Sophie's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't want to forget her completely." "You won't. Your dad makes sure of that. And even if specific memories fade, the love doesn't. That stays." Sophie nodded slowly, then turned back to the cookie dough with determined focus. "Okay, now we mix everything together, but not too much or the cookies get tough." They worked in companionable silence, Sophie's earlier vulnerability carefully tucked away. The cookies went into the oven, filling the apartment with warmth and sweetness. Rachel realized with surprise that she was enjoying herself. The mess, the companionship, the simple act of creating something together. Evan arrived precisely at 6, his arms full of duffel bags and looking exhausted. Sophie launched herself at him immediately. "Dad, we made cookies, and Rachel doesn't keep food in her house, so we ordered a lot, and her apartment is really clean, but kind of sad because it doesn't have personality, but we're fixing that." Evan caught Rachel's eye over his daughter's head, his expression grateful and overwhelmed. "Sounds like you've had quite an afternoon." "We did." Rachel took one of the bags from him. "Come in. Tell me about the house situation." While Sophie showed Evan her temporary room and the cookies they'd made, Rachel set out plates and reheated leftovers from the grocery order. When they finally sat down to eat, Evan provided the details. The leak originated in the main line, so it affected the entire building. They're estimating 3 to 4 days minimum for repairs and safety clearance. I grabbed what I could, but I couldn't get everything. He looked apologetic. "I know this is an imposition, Rachel. If it's too much, we can find a hotel." "Don't be ridiculous. You're staying here." Rachel's voice was firm. "I have the space. Sophie and I already figured out the guest room situation. This is happening." Something in Evan's expression shifted, relief mixed with something deeper, more vulnerable. "Thank you, seriously. This means everything." After dinner, Sophie insisted on a full apartment tour, critiquing Rachel's decor choices with brutal honesty and suggesting improvements. By bedtime, she'd identified 3 places that desperately needed pictures or plants, and declared the living room too white to be believed. "I like her," Rachel said later, after Sophie was tucked in with her stuffed animals and nightlight. She and Evan sat on the balcony despite the November chill, wrapped in blankets and drinking wine. "She's honest and smart and completely herself." "She really likes you too." Evan's hand found hers beneath the blanket. "I could hear her through the door earlier. She told Rachel the resilient that you were probably going to be important, and that's high praise in Sophie speak." Rachel felt warmth bloom in her chest. "I told her about being sick. Not details, but she asked why I didn't have kids, and I didn't want to lie." "How did she take it?" "With more grace than most adults." Rachel leaned against Evan's shoulder. "She's remarkable. You've done an incredible job raising her." "We've survived together." "That's different than doing a good job." "It's both." Rachel turned to look at him directly. "Evan, she's emotionally intelligent and kind and resilient. That's because of you, because of the work you've put in, the honest conversations, the way you've helped her process grief." Evan's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Thank you for saying that. Some days I feel like I'm drowning and just hoping she doesn't notice." "She notices, and she loves you fiercely because of it, not despite it." They sat in comfortable silence, the city lights spreading below them like scattered stars. Rachel felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness, of pieces clicking into place. "This is nice," Evan said quietly. "Being here with you, having Sophie here, It feels right. It does, Rachel agreed. Then, because honesty seemed essential, she added, it also terrifies me. Why? Because I'm letting you both in, really in, into my space, my life, my carefully controlled existence. She gestured at the apartment behind them. Sophie's right that this place is empty. I kept it that way deliberately. No personality, no attachment, no risk of loss. And now you're here, and she's naming my lack of photos, and I'm realizing how much I've been hiding from actually living. Evan squeezed her hand. You don't have to hide anymore. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not good at this domestic stuff, at being part of a family? What if I disappoint you both? Rachel, Evan turned to face her fully. You made cookies with my daughter. You picked her up from school without hesitation. You've opened your home to us with zero complaints about the inconvenience. You're already doing it, already being exactly what we need. I don't know how to do this long term, how to integrate someone else's chaos into my structured life, how to be flexible and spontaneous, and you learn. We all learn together. Evan's thumb traced circles on her palm. Nobody knows how to do this perfectly. We just try and adjust and try again. Rachel wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that her lack of practice didn't doom them before they'd really begun. What if my apartment stays this sterile because I don't know how to make it feel like home? Then we'll figure it out together. Sophie's already planning design interventions. She mentioned something about emergency plan adoption and photo wall installation. Despite her anxiety, Rachel laughed. She's very passionate about interior decorating. She gets it from her mother. My wife could make anywhere feel like home within an hour of arriving. Evan's voice carried fondness without the sharp edge of grief. Sophie inherited that gift. Give her 3 days in your apartment, and it'll have personality whether you want it or not. I think I want it, Rachel admitted quietly. The personality, the chaos, the evidence that people actually live here. Good. Because we're here now, making messes and leaving traces. Evan kissed her temple. Is that okay? Rachel thought about flour-dusted counters and chocolate chips on the floor, about Sophie's stuffed animals crowding the guest bed and Evan's shaving kit on the bathroom counter, about the grocery order that had filled her empty pantry and the cookies cooling on racks in her kitchen, evidence of life, of connection, of people choosing to be in her space. It's perfect, she whispered. They stayed on the balcony until the cold drove them inside, then checked on Sophie one more time, fast asleep, clutching Rachel the resilient, completely secure in this temporary home. In Rachel's bedroom, Evan hesitated. I should sleep on the couch. Keep things appropriate with Sophie here. Stay, Rachel surprised herself with the certainty. Not for anything inappropriate, just because I don't want to sleep alone tonight. Evan searched her face, then nodded. They got ready for bed in comfortable silence, the domesticity of it both strange and natural. When they finally settled under the covers, Rachel curled against Evan's chest, listening to his heartbeat. Thank you for this, Evan murmured into her hair, for giving us space here, for being patient with all our complications. Thank you for trusting me with them, Rachel replied, for letting me in. She fell asleep feeling safe and chosen, Evan's arms around her and Sophie asleep down the hall. Her apartment, usually echoing with emptiness, hummed with quiet life. It felt, Rachel realized with wonder, like home. The next morning arrived too early, Sophie's voice penetrating Rachel's sleep. Dad? Rachel, are you awake? I can't find the cereal. Evan groaned against Rachel's shoulder. She's an early riser, like aggressively early. I gathered that. Rachel extricated herself from his embrace, pulling on a robe. I should probably help her before she reorganizes my entire kitchen. Too late. She's probably already started. In the kitchen, Sophie had indeed begun rearranging cupboards, standing on a chair to reach upper shelves. The cereal was all the way up there, she said accusingly. That's not practical for daily use. It should be at eye level. Rachel bit back a smile. You're absolutely right. Where do you think it should go? Sophie spent the next 20 minutes directing a complete kitchen reorganization, explaining the logic behind each decision with the authority of someone 3 times her age. By the time Evan emerged, showered and dressed for work, the kitchen bore little resemblance to its previous sterile organization. I see Sophie's been helping, he said dryly. It's better now, Sophie announced. More functional. Rachel, you need better breakfast options. Adults can't just drink coffee and call it a meal. She's not wrong, Evan said, pouring himself coffee from Rachel's machine. Though I'm one to talk. They navigated the morning with surprising ease, taking turns in the bathroom, making breakfast together, ensuring Sophie had everything she needed for school. Rachel found herself falling into the rhythm without conscious thought, anticipating needs and adjusting her routine naturally. I could drop Sophie at school, she offered. If you need to get to the office early. Evan looked surprised and grateful. Are you sure? That's out of your way. I don't mind. Sophie and I can discuss her continued interior design plans for my apartment. Sophie brightened immediately. We need to talk about the living room. It's an emergency situation. After Evan left, Rachel and Sophie drove to school together, continuing their discussion about proper home decoration and the tragedy of empty walls. When Rachel pulled up to the drop-off lane, Sophie paused before climbing out. Thank you for letting us stay, she said seriously, and for making cookies with me, and for not being weird about my dad sleeping in your room even though I know he did because his door was open this morning and the couch wasn't messed up. Rachel felt heat climb her neck. Sophie, it's okay. I'm glad he has someone to sleep next to. He gets lonely at night sometimes. I hear him walking around when he thinks I'm asleep. Sophie's hand found Rachel's. I think you get lonely at night too, so it's good you have each other. The observation, delivered with such casual wisdom, made Rachel's eyes sting. You're very perceptive. I know, it's my superpower. Sophie grinned. See you tonight. We're making spaghetti, remember? With the cheese situation I told you about. Rachel watched her skip toward the school building, backpack bouncing, completely secure in her temporary displacement. This child who'd lost her mother, who'd been uprooted and moved across the country, who had every reason to be insecure and clingy. Instead, she was confident and generous and wise beyond her years. Evan had done that, had created safety and stability even through grief and chaos, had taught his daughter that hard things made you stronger, not broken. Rachel drove to work thinking about empty apartments and full hearts, about the difference between existing and living, about the courage it took to let people in. Her carefully controlled life was becoming beautifully messy, and instead of terrifying her, it felt like coming home. At the office, she found herself smiling at random moments, distracted by thoughts of Sophie's kitchen critique and Evan's goodnight kiss. Jennifer from HR caught her in the hallway. You look happy, she observed. The relationship is going well? It is. Rachel couldn't suppress her smile. Really well. They're actually staying with me for a few days. Housing emergency. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. That's fast. You're sure you're ready for that level of integration? I wasn't, Rachel admitted. But it's happening anyway, and it's perfect. His daughter is reorganizing my kitchen and critiquing my decor and making me realize my apartment is desperately empty. And you're okay with that? Rachel considered the question seriously. More than okay. For the first time in years, my apartment feels like a place people actually live. It's chaotic and messy and wonderful. Jennifer's expression softened. Good. You deserve that, Rachel. You've spent so long building this company, sacrificing your personal life. It's nice to see you choosing differently. The word stayed with Rachel throughout the day. Choosing differently. Choosing connection over isolation, mess over sterility, risk over safety. Choosing to let Evan and Sophie into her carefully controlled world and trusting that the disruption would be worth it. That evening, Sophie made good on her promise of spaghetti with the cheese situation, which turned out to be an elaborate layering system that defied conventional pasta preparation. The three of them worked together in Rachel's kitchen, Sophie directing operations while Rachel and Evan followed instructions and traded amused glances. This is nice, Evan said quietly while Sophie was distracted by garlic bread preparation. Us. Here. Doing this together. It really is, Rachel agreed, and meant it completely. The 4 days stretched into a week, then 2. Evan's building manager kept discovering additional problems, corroded pipes, faulty wiring, issues that required permits and inspections and time. Each extension of their stay felt both like an imposition Rachel insisted wasn't one, and a gift she was terrified to acknowledge wanting. Her apartment transformed around them. Sophie's promised design interventions materialized gradually. A spider plant on the kitchen windowsill, photographs printed and framed on previously bare walls, colorful throw pillows that clashed beautifully with Rachel's monochrome aesthetic. Evidence of life accumulated in corners Rachel had kept deliberately empty for years. "I'm getting too comfortable here," Evan said one night after Sophie was asleep. They were curled together on Rachel's couch, which now sported a fuzzy blanket Sophie had declared essential for proper coziness. "We should probably start looking at temporary housing options. Give you your space back." Rachel's stomach clenched at the thought. "What if I don't want my space back?" Evan pulled back to look at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean this." Rachel gestured around the apartment. "You being here, Sophie reorganizing my kitchen and leaving her butterfly books everywhere and making my home feel alive for the first time since I bought it." She took a shaky breath. "I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay." "Rachel, are you saying, see? I'm saying move in. Officially, both of you." The words tumbled out before courage could fail her. "Not because of the housing situation, because I want to wake up with you every morning and have Sophie critique my breakfast choices and come home to people who actually care if I had a good day." Evan's eyes were very bright. "That's a huge step." "I know, and maybe it's too fast. We've only been doing this for a month, but having you here feels right in a way nothing in my life has felt right in years." Rachel caught his hands. "I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up, that I don't know how to do this domestic thing well enough. But I want to try. With you. With Sophie. I want to choose this." "You're sure?" Evan's voice was rough with emotion. "Because once we do this, once we really blend our lives together, there's no going back to how things were. Sophie will get attached. I'll get attached. It becomes real. I want real." Rachel felt tears threaten. "I've spent 6 years being safe and controlled and alone. I'm done with that. I want messy and complicated and yours." Evan kissed her then, deep and certain, his hands framing her face. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, we'll stay. We'll make this home for all of us." Relief flooded through Rachel so intensely it was physical. "Yeah? Yeah." Though fair warning, Sophie's going to want to repaint at least 3 rooms and install floating shelves for her butterfly collection. Rachel laughed, slightly teary. "I can live with that." They told Sophie the next morning over pancakes. She looked between them with those 2 perceptive eyes, processing. "So we're staying here forever? This is our home now?" "If that's okay with you," Evan said carefully. "Rachel wants us here. All of us. But only if you're comfortable with it." Sophie considered seriously. "What about our old house? My room there? My things?" "We'll get everything from the old house once it's cleared," Evan assured her. "All your things will come here. This will be your real home, not just visiting." "And Rachel will be here every day? In the mornings and at night and everything?" "Every day," Rachel confirmed, her heart hammering. "If you want me to be." Sophie studied Rachel for a long moment. Then she said, "Can I ask you something kind of important?" "Of course." "If you and Dad are doing this, like really doing it, does that make you kind of like my mom? Not replacing my real mom," she added quickly, "but like another mom? A different kind?" Rachel felt her throat close. She looked at Evan, who nodded encouragingly, leaving the answer to her. "I could never replace your mom," Rachel said carefully. "She'll always be your mother. The person who loved you first, who gave you life. Nothing changes that." She paused, choosing words with care. "But if you wanted, I could be someone who loves you and takes care of you and is here for you, not instead of your mom, in addition to the memory of her." "Does that make sense?" Sophie's eyes were very bright. "Like a bonus person. Extra love instead of replacement love." "Exactly like that." "Okay," Sophie nodded decisively. "I think that's good, because I do want you here. You make Dad happy, and you make good cookies, and you listen when I talk about butterflies, even though most adults just pretend to care." Rachel found herself blinking back tears. "Thank you for saying that." "You're welcome. Now can we talk about my new room, because if I'm staying forever, I need it to be perfect." The logistics of combining households proved complicated but manageable. They retrieved Sophie's furniture and belongings from the old house, integrating her colorful chaos into Rachel's minimalist space. Evan's things followed: his clothes in Rachel's closet, his coffee mug in the kitchen, his presence in every room. The apartment that had echoed with emptiness for years suddenly hummed with life. At work, the arrangement raised eyebrows. Jennifer called Rachel in for a follow-up conversation about the accelerated timeline. "Living together after a month," Jennifer said carefully. "That's fast, Rachel. Are you sure you've thought this through?" "Probably not enough," Rachel admitted. "But I'm sure anyway. Life doesn't wait for perfect timing. Sometimes you just have to be brave and trust it'll work out." "And if it doesn't?" Rachel considered the question honestly. "Then I'll have tried. I'll have chosen connection over safety, and that feels worth the risk." Jennifer studied her for a long moment. "You're different, happier, more present. Whatever you're doing, it's working for you." "It is," Rachel said simply. "For the first time in years, I'm not just existing. I'm actually living." The transition wasn't seamless. Rachel struggled with the loss of solitude, with never having the apartment to herself, with the constant negotiation of shared space. Sophie had nightmares that required comfort at 3 in the morning. Evan's work schedule sometimes clashed with Rachel's. They argued about dishwasher loading techniques and appropriate bedtimes and whose turn it was to grocery shop. But they also laughed. They cooked together and built blanket forts and watched terrible movies while Sophie provided running commentary. They celebrated small victories and comforted each other through hard days. They built something new from the broken pieces of their individual pasts. 6 weeks after Evan and Sophie officially moved in, Rachel came home to find her apartment transformed. Evan and Sophie had spent the afternoon hanging pictures, photos of the three of them at various outings, candid shots that captured their emerging family, images that made the space undeniably theirs. "Surprise!" Sophie announced proudly. "We've fixed the sad wall situation. Now it has personality and memories and everything." Rachel stood in her living room, looking at evidence of their life together displayed proudly, and felt something crack open in her chest. This was home. Not because of the expensive furniture or the impressive address, but because of the people who filled it with laughter and chaos and love. "It's perfect," she whispered. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Evan found Rachel standing in front of the photo wall, tracing the frame of a picture showing all three of them at the botanical garden, Sophie pointing excitedly at a butterfly while Rachel and Evan smiled at each other over her head. "Having second thoughts?" Evan asked quietly, coming to stand beside her. "The opposite." Rachel leaned into him. "I'm thinking about how empty this wall was 2 months ago, how empty my entire life was. And now it's full of you both, and I can't imagine going back." "You don't have to go back. This is forward, for all of us." Rachel turned to face him fully. "I need to tell you something." "Okay." Evan's expression turned serious. "You're scaring me a little." "Don't be scared. It's good. I think." Rachel took a steadying breath. "I have a doctor's appointment next week. My 6-month checkup, blood work, imaging, the whole thing to make sure I'm still in remission." "I know. You mentioned it last month." Evan's hands found hers. "What about it?" "I've always gone alone, convinced myself I didn't need support, that it was my thing to handle." Rachel met his eyes. "But I don't want to do it alone anymore. I want you there. If you're willing." Evan's expression softened with understanding. "Of course I'm willing. Rachel, I want to be there for all of it. The scary medical stuff, the routine stuff, all of it. It might be hard. If the results aren't good, then we'll handle it together." Evan's voice was firm. "That's what this is. What we're building. We handle the hard things together." Rachel felt tears threaten. "I'm not used to having someone to handle things with." "I know, but you do now. Me and Sophie. We're your people. Let us be your people." The appointment arrived too quickly. Rachel woke that morning with familiar anxiety coiling in her stomach, the old fear that this would be the time her luck ran out. But instead of facing it alone in sterile silence, she had Evan's hand to hold in the waiting room and his steady presence beside her through the examination. The imaging took an hour. The blood work was routine. The waiting for results felt eternal. Tell me something, Rachel said, sitting in the doctor's private office while they waited for the radiologist's report. Something to distract me from spiraling. Evan thought for a moment. Sophie wants to get a pet. She's been researching extensively and has prepared a presentation on why we need a cat. Despite her nerves, Rachel smiled. A presentation? With slides. She's very thorough. Apparently cats are beneficial for family cohesion and therapeutic for stress management. Evan grinned. I have no idea where she gets this stuff. She's remarkable. You both are. We're yours, Evan said simply. Whatever happens in the next few minutes, whatever the doctor says, we're yours and you're ours. That doesn't change. The door opened before Rachel could respond. Dr. Martinez entered with Rachel's chart, her expression professionally neutral in a way that made Rachel's stomach drop. Rachel, good to see you. Dr. Martinez settled behind her desk. I have your results. Rachel gripped Evan's hand hard enough to hurt. And? Everything looks good. Blood work is normal. Imaging is clear. No signs of recurrence. Dr. Martinez smiled. You're still in remission. See you again in 6 months. The relief was so intense Rachel felt lightheaded. 6 more months. 6 more months of health and life and the future she was building with Evan and Sophie. 6 more months of choosing to live instead of just survive. Thank you, she managed. Thank you so much. Outside the medical building, Rachel sagged against Evan, letting the fear and tension drain away. You're okay, Evan murmured into her hair. You're okay and we're okay, and everything's okay. I was so scared, Rachel's voice broke. Every time I'm convinced it's back, that I used up all my luck the first time. I know, but it's not back. You're healthy. You're here. Evan pulled back to frame her face with his hands. And I'm so grateful you're here. That we get more time, that Sophie gets to know you and love you and benefit from having you in her life. Rachel kissed him there in the parking lot, not caring who saw, pouring 6 months of relief and gratitude and love into it. When they separated, both slightly breathless, Evan was smiling. Come on, he said. Let's go pick up Sophie from school and tell her about the good news, and maybe discuss this cat presentation she's been working on. You're actually considering a cat? I'm considering making our family bigger in whatever ways make sense. Evan caught her hand as they walked to the car. We've already added you. What's one more? That evening, Sophie delivered her cat presentation with impressive formality, complete with visual aids and cited sources. Rachel and Evan sat on the couch trying to maintain serious expressions while she argued her case with the intensity of a seasoned lawyer. And in conclusion, Sophie finished, a cat would provide companionship, teach responsibility, and make our family more complete. Plus, they're very good at being soft and purring, which is scientifically proven to reduce stress. That's very compelling, Rachel said solemnly. Can we have a night to think about it? Sophie looked suspicious but nodded. One night, but I expect a decision by breakfast. After Sophie went to bed, Rachel and Evan discussed the cat proposal seriously. She really wants this, Evan said. And honestly, I think it might be good for her. Give her something to nurture and care for. I've never had a pet. Rachel felt compelled to admit this. I don't know anything about cats. We'll learn together, like we learn everything else. Evan pulled her closer. What do you think? Ready to add a cat to our chaos? Rachel thought about her apartment 2 months ago. Pristine, sterile, empty. Then she thought about it now. Full of laughter and photographs and butterfly books and love. What was one more addition? Let's do it, she said. Let's get Sophie her cat. Sophie's joy the next morning when they agreed was incandescent. She immediately began planning names, supplies, shelter visits to find the perfect feline companion. Within a week, they'd adopted an orange tabby kitten Sophie named Monarch because of its striped pattern and adventurous spirit. The cat integrated into their household with surprising ease, claiming spaces and hearts with equal efficiency. Rachel found herself charmed by the small creature that demanded attention and gave affection freely, adding yet another layer to the family they were building. Work evolved too. Rachel found herself delegating more, trusting her team to handle responsibilities she'd previously insisted on controlling herself. She left the office at reasonable hours, prioritizing dinners at home and Sophie's bedtime routine over late meetings and extra projects. Jennifer noticed, of course. "You're different," she observed during a quarterly review. "More balanced, less intense. It's good to see." "I'm learning that success doesn't require sacrificing everything else," Rachel said. "That having a life outside work actually makes me better at my job, not worse." "Took you long enough to figure that out." Jennifer's smile was genuine. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Building the company was impressive. But building a life? That's brave." The observation stayed with Rachel. Building a life. That's what she was doing, constructing something meaningful from the raw materials of second chances and chosen family and hard-won healing. 3 months after Evan and Sophie moved in, Rachel made a decision. She called a board meeting and announced she was stepping back from day-to-day operations, transitioning to a chairman role with significantly reduced responsibilities. The board was shocked. Several members argued against it, but Rachel was firm. "I built this company from nothing," she said calmly. "I've given it 20 years of my life, and it's successful because I hired brilliant people and created strong systems. It's time to trust those people and systems. Time for me to actually live the life I've been postponing." Michael Chen, Evan's direct supervisor, spoke up. "What will you do with all that free time?" Rachel smiled. "Learn to sail, take piano lessons, be present for a 7-year-old's butterfly education. Build a life that's about more than quarterly earnings and market share." The transition took 2 months. Rachel trained her successor, established new boundaries, and slowly stepped back from the company that had consumed her adult life. It felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating, releasing control, trusting others, choosing differently. Evan watched the process with quiet support, never pushing but always present. "Any regrets?" he asked one evening after Rachel had officially transitioned to her new role. "Not a single one." Rachel meant it completely. "I'm 42 years old. I spent 2 decades building professional success at the expense of everything else. I don't want to spend the next 2 decades the same way." "What do you want?" Rachel looked around their living room, Sophie doing homework at the coffee table, Monarch curled on the couch, evidence of their blended life everywhere. "This. Exactly this. More of this." Summer arrived with warm evenings and long days. Rachel enrolled in sailing lessons and discovered she loved being on the water. She started piano lessons and was, as predicted, terrible, but found joy in the learning anyway. She showed up for Sophie's school events and helped with homework and became a familiar presence in their daughter's life. Because that's what Sophie had become. Theirs. Not just Evan's daughter who Rachel loved, but their daughter. The child they were raising together, making decisions about together, building a future around together. One evening in July, almost 8 months after that first midnight confession, Evan found Rachel on the balcony looking at the city lights. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About how different everything is from a year ago." Rachel leaned back against him. "About how I was convinced I'd missed my chance at this kind of life. That surviving cancer meant accepting permanent loneliness as the price. And now? Now I know that surviving was just the beginning, that the life I built after survival is the real victory." Rachel turned in his arms. "I'm happy, Evan. Really, genuinely happy in a way I'd stopped believing was possible." "Me too." Evan's voice was rough with emotion. "I thought I'd used up my chance at this when my wife died. That I'd had my love story, and that was it. But this, us, it's different. Not better or worse, just different, and real, and right." "I love you," Rachel said, the words coming easily now. "You and Sophie. This life we've built together. I love you too." Evan kissed her softly. "Thank you for being brave enough to let us in, for choosing this even when it scared you." Inside, Sophie called for them, something about Monarch knocking over a plant and needing help with cleanup. They went together, laughing at the chaos, working as a team to manage the small crisis. Later, after Sophie was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Rachel stood in her bedroom doorway looking at the space they'd made theirs. Evan's books on the nightstand, both their clothes in the closet, photographs documenting their growing family scattered throughout. This was home. Not because of the address or the square footage, but because of the people who filled it. Because she'd been brave enough to admit she was lonely, and Evan had been brave enough to choose her anyway. Because a 7-year-old had insisted on butterfly education and personality in empty spaces. Because they'd all chosen each other, deliberately and repeatedly, building something new from broken pieces. Rachel's scars still marked her abdomen, physical reminders of what she'd survived. But she'd stopped seeing them as damage. They were proof she'd fought and won, evidence that she'd endured long enough to find this second chance at happiness. She thought about that midnight conversation in her office, how hopeless she'd felt, how convinced that no one would ever choose her. How wrong she'd been. Evan had chosen her, Sophie had chosen her. They chose her every day, in small ways and large, building a family from love and intention and hard-won healing. And she chose them right back. Monarch wandered into the bedroom, meowing imperiously for attention. Rachel scooped up the cat, scratching behind its ears, feeling the rumble of purring against her chest. "We're quite the collection," she told the cat quietly. "A CEO learning to let go. A widower learning to love again. A wise child teaching us both. And you, adding chaos wherever possible." Monarch purred louder, clearly unconcerned with the philosophical observation. Evan appeared in the doorway, smiling at the sight of Rachel holding the cat. "Talking to yourself?" "Talking to Monarch. It's different." "If you say so." He crossed to her, wrapping both her and the cat in his arms. "Ready for bed?" "Ready for everything," Rachel said, and meant it. They settled into bed together, Monarch claiming space between them, the sounds of the city filtering through the windows. Tomorrow, Sophie had a field trip Rachel had volunteered to chaperone. Next week, they were planning a sailing day trip. Next month, Evan's parents were visiting to meet the woman who'd become part of their son's life. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities and challenges and beautiful ordinary moments. Rachel wasn't afraid of it anymore. She had people to face it with, people who chose her and kept choosing her, people who loved her scars and all. "Evan?" she said into the darkness. "Hmm?" "Thank you for staying late that Friday night, for noticing me, for being brave enough to say you'd choose me." Evan's hand found hers beneath the covers, lacing their fingers together. "Best decision I ever made, besides marrying my first wife and having Sophie, of course." "Of course," Rachel agreed, smiling. "But this, it's proof that life can surprise you, that second chances exist, that survival can lead to something better than just existing." Rachel squeezed his hand, thinking about the journey from that desperate midnight confession to this peaceful moment. About how far they'd all come, how much they'd healed, how much love they'd built from the wreckage of their separate pasts. "We did good," she whispered. "We did," Evan agreed. "We really did." In the next room, Sophie slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that she was loved and safe. Throughout the apartment, evidence of their blended life created a tapestry of belonging. Monarch purred contentedly between them, adding warmth to the small family. Rachel closed her eyes, feeling Evan's steady breathing beside her, knowing Sophie was just down the hall, surrounded by all the physical proof that she belonged somewhere, to someone, to this carefully constructed, beautifully imperfect family they'd chosen to become. The scars on her abdomen no longer marked endings. They marked the beginning of everything that came after: survival, healing, and eventually, love. They were proof she'd endured long enough to find this moment, this life, these people. And that, Rachel thought, as sleep claimed her, was worth every battle she'd fought to get here. Their story wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It was about two broken people and one resilient child choosing to build something whole together. About finding family in unexpected places. About second chances and hard-won happiness and the courage to reach for connection even when it terrified you. It was about being chosen, about choosing in return, about learning that survival was just the beginning and the real victory was building a life worth surviving for. In the quiet apartment, 3 hearts beat in peaceful rhythm, separate but synchronized, individual but united, complete. Home.